Mr. Chair, you ready?
Yes. The red light on the owl versus green light on the phone, is the phone actual audio?
Yes, so.
The owl audio is muted. The phone audio is on.
That's my question.
You need to mute the phone.
There we go. There we go. Get it rolling. 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 There we go. Get it rolling.
To me. You're right. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
All right, there's an electric cord connected.
Oh.
Here we are. It was the phone.
All right, so two topics here. First, we're gonna talk about our health insurance short renewal. And then we're gonna talk about the recommendation and really needing some direction on the scale insurance renewal. So for the health insurance short renewal, the county does intend to move to a January 1st insurance renewal. So we need to do this regardless of the scale insurance pool decision. It simplifies our employee and county administration of accounts, particularly as we're going to be adding an HSA, or the plan is to add an HSA for that 1/1 renewal. This really is to align plan years with IRS limits. It changes in the middle of our plan year right now. It aligns renewal and open enrollment with the general market overall. I know that for me personally, my wife and I are at very different times of the year. We do have to do an open enrollment for that short renewal period from 8/1 to 12/31. And the Employee Insurance Committee has recommended a 3% increase from current rates for that short renewal period. We'll still likely have another increase for the 1/1 of 2027 renewal, but this will kind of help us from having to do as big of one. Some questions on how that math calculation works, but we want to be supportive of the Employee Insurance Committee's recommendation to move forward with that 3% on the increase. Now I think it's popping up on the screen. And so just to show, this is what our increases would look like, 25 to 26 increase. The county cost share would go up by $31 for single and up to $73, up by $73 for family. The employee cost for single would be $3.47, for family a little bit under $25. The impact of this for the county costs would be about $175,000 for that 4-month period. And then the employee costs are $45,000. This is using the base plan. So pretty straightforward unless the board really wants to direct us to do something different, but we're just supportive of following that EIC recommendation. We'd be doing an increase during this time frame anyway, so it's already been thought through and incorporated into our financials. And then the next one, and we should have that increase before we get to our proposed budget.
And so the 1/1 is good for two reasons. I mean, A, it just brings us into conformity of sorts and takes away confusion, just in our general. And then it will also help moving forward if there's, others joining this pool or
If
whatever.
we decide to join the scale insurance pool, like, it would help us that we need to be on the same plane here as everyone else, and we're off on. For us, and that's what I say, this is regardless of the scale insurance, we've been targeting this for
Yeah.
a while.
Yep,
We already have some additional administrative burden managing like flexible spending accounts and different rates within there. When you add an HSA on top of that, it makes it more complicated for employees to know how much they can contribute and for staff to administer it. This just simplifies everything across the board. Any questions? Are we good with that being brought forward at our next board meeting or shortly thereafter?
Can I just say too, at the board meeting, if it's directed to be brought forward, we'll also bring you shorter FSA. So we have to align to that 5 month. So we have to do a short FSA. We have to change that amount for that short plan year. And then we'd also have to address the stop loss in that, because that was going to be a change as well for that short plan year. So there's a couple other items in there that align the rest of our benefits to the short plan year for that transitional period.
all things that are gonna be awesome, and some hurdles, but nothing crazy, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Just more that when you see it, there's a couple other things that have to go with it so as to make it all
Yes, that'd be so
just together.
This is more nice.
Yeah, good to get done no matter what.
All right. There's no other questions, then scale health insurance pool. So gonna talk, the weighted votes, legal status, kind of what happened with that, the joint power agreement changes. That we had some direction on tightening some things up when we had gone through that a while back. And then ending with a staff recommendation. So for weighting voted, just a reminder, the Senate and the revisor's office legal counsel had said we do not need a statutory change. Which led to the bill not being introduced by our sponsor that was wanting to take it. So we reached out to the Department of Commerce multiple times through multiple channels, weren't able to get a response until we had a legislator provide us that contact and said we could use their name in that. We did meet with the Department of Commerce on 28th with Darcy Heitzman, our scale insurance legal counsel. And it took them a couple of weeks to get us a response, and the response was that the weighted voting structure may not be allowed under the rules. So they said it wasn't a legal opinion, but that would take going through their legal counsel for even further, because we wanted an opinion if there was any opportunity for a legislative action at the end.
And just to be clear, the they that said it was not a legal opinion was the person, staff or
Whatever,
whatever.
there's like the director of policy affairs or some, I could pull up the title.
So was there, I don't want to put words in there, but cursory review of like, this might not work. This may not work.
I think the cursory review is that this wouldn't work. They didn't want to be definitive as if they were giving us legal counsel, and it hadn't gone through their legal counsel's office.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the use of the word may. May can mean it may not, or it absolutely cannot.
Right.
Which one?
Or put,
They were not giving a definitive. I think we're hearing the staff interpretation of, they probably would say it didn't obey the rules. This was an email communication, but the tenor of it, from my perspective, was they would read it as not being aligned with the rules, which was actually where we had started out with the statutory rule change from the very beginning, because our legal counsel was, the rules say you can have one member on the board. One member can have one representative on the board. This was clearly intended to circumvent that. And we're being too cute to try and go around it, where we started out from our interpretation. So that's, we weren't surprised.
So they confirmed our initial interpretation of the law.
which then the question is, and I asked this most, we're down there. We have our priorities, all the big HHS stuff, modernization, all those things. But I talked with Tony and Eric about this, the language, this recently, like in face to face on Thursday when we were down there. And it was like, hey, we've already we've had this pass through this and the other, and it's gonna comport with, what is it, Article 14 or whatever it is. Like I pushed enough ropes, so, but yet the watershed language got in. So that's what, was it just political capital? Like, why was that language originally dropped? Do we know why?
Why our language was drawn?
Well, I mean, because we had you know, authors for that to get that language through.
Why Eric will continue to forward that.
Yeah,
So with a communication notes from me is that when you hear from the Senate Legal Counsel and the Revised Legal Counsel, it's not necessary. He took it and how it's communicated is if you get a no from Commerce, then you can bring it back and we will take this forward. From the watershed district's perspective, it wasn't a rule that they were looking at changing. There was a lack of clarity in statute, from my understanding. The watershed's legal counsel was saying, no, you cannot be part of this pool. Darcy was saying, well, if you read it this way or that way, and the watershed didn't want to be in a place where it's depending on your attorney's position, they wanted it clear that they could be a participant in the pool.
well, and I'm just a little curious, I guess, at this point, because it's still so fresh, but wasn't that language, the watershed language, and I'm gonna call it the scale language, I don't know what the right phraseology is for the weighted voting, weren't those basically conjoined?
Somewhat, but it actually went through the watershed district's organization, carried that language, I believe, for them. It wasn't us carrying that language for the watershed district. Leslie, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, there were three things that we had asked for in the original language and they eliminated two of them. And so I don't know why they just didn't continue to move it forward for scale and use that terminology like we originally asked for, so.
Yeah, I'm just looking, I don't know, Jake compared, but.
But they could have, I mean, one of them could have stood up on the floor and said, we need this minor change in one of their sessions.
Yeah, because it wasn't, nothing about.
There was nothing political
Like-
about it, correct.
You know, like, oh boy, this is gonna be scary for
As
somebody.
far as I know, there was nothing political.
But then what is our, I know we're talking more about it, but. So, I mean, the email or whatever came out at, I don't know what time it was, 4, whatever on Friday, I was busy at the moment. So we get that. In sessions, you know, that's why I'm like, oh, so I, you know. Said busy with wedding, whatever, which was. Stay in that frame of mind. But up until Sunday, you know, I was getting some feedback that Eric was gonna talk to or had talked to the Commerce Commissioner, Department of Commerce Commissioner on Friday and asked for another look at that and get back to the ASAP. As of yesterday, as of now, I haven't heard back if that ever happened. But then, you know, what is the hierarchy again from the legislative affairs side of it? If reviser and Senate legal says, should be good. Trumps who? And then does it now still require a legislative action? Which now, or orders or something that can be done. Between now and then, January, whatever.
So. I don't know, right? So I think Jake and I, we spoke on Friday morning. Had a chance for him to debrief and it was from our lobbyist, Tony Albright, said. Ed told him we need a different approach. I'm like, we need to have a meeting during the summer here to say, what is that approach, right? Is the Senate and Revisor's Office gonna tell us you still don't need this and we need something hard and fast from it? Like, I don't know what that approach is. So that's one of the strategies we need to play out.
Well, our legislators didn't have to listen to the Senate legal counsel.
Right, right, but that's, you know, part of it is just a more of sorts that body's not told yet, but. Like, is that weighty enough? Cause I asked about that several different times when we get down there as part of our, you know, we're talking about our stuff. It was to say, yeah, you know, they've already said this is already gonna be, it's good. So what is this? It feels like it's another one of those agency things and rulemaking things that comes back and bites us in the butt, whether it's like it feels like a middle finger, I hate to be crude, or pocket.
So that's not how I view it. So we went into this from our legal counsel's perspective, who is knowledgeable and be saying we needed the statutory change. And we,
That starts that you're talking about.
yeah, and Jake had pushed on, hey, our legal counsel wants a statutory change and got told, you need to back off. This is what we're hearing from our legal counsel. You need to take this other approach. And so we wanted to go down that other approach to meet what our senator was trying to tell us the path we had to go down. So that's the path we did. But if you read the rules, like I said, it's set up to say one member, one representative on the Board of Trustees. the impetus here is we could have been one of the members and it could be a 3-member board, right? But part of the plan with scale was that everyone wanted at least some representation on that board, but they accepted that it was different voting weights. And so that's where it's, well, we are taking on more of the risk here. We're the reason this works. We have experience with pools. We wanted a larger say in the decision-making, but still giving representation there. So that's where this kind of needs to play out in a different weighted voting structure.
I also think this got caught up because there were other collaborative groups that had legislation out there for some of their routes. So as an example, the education group is looking to require all schools to be part of a collaborative. So I think the rule was being approached from different groups in a few different ways, and that potentially could have been part of what, when it hit commerce, there was more than just our request going on, and they didn't want to go sideways. And again, that's just my thinking. I don't know that that's true.
I'm gonna go along with you on that, because we originally requested it for Scott and Scale for
Right.
this specific pool. They
Right.
changed that then, and it went down generalizing for watersheds and took out our 2 key things on merging and weighted voting. In our original legislation, it was for our county and our scale project, a very specific. When they changed that, I think then that's what happened. They didn't go down that route. It became more general. Now it impacts every pool that's out there.
And the they in that statement is, just to be clear, they took it out, who's the they? Okay.
If he had left, to Commissioner Brecky's point, our very specific language for our pool that we were creating, that one, basically any one of our little entities could have joined. 2, it was a merging of the pool. And 3, that there was weighted voting for the JPA of the members.
Yeah.
And the JPA of the members then is where, remember, they told us they don't, Commerce can't get involved with JPA, so we had that whole discussion. But Commerce rules, the JPA didn't meet that, and that's what we tried to argue at first. You're missing the rule portion. Maybe statutorily you're okay, but the rule issue. And we could never get Commerce though to meet until very late in the process. And at that point, then it became much broader than just Scott County.
And so I don't think it's a middle finger because they're telling us what we thought was true anyways. Did you said it was an email communication back on May 13th. Did you call the person at all?
I didn't call the person to get follow-up on it.
I think that'd be a good idea, right? Just. Cause that, I agree with John, that language may not be allowed under the rules. Where they're at or like. Yeah, I think
Yeah, you-
always follow-up calls like that are
You
good.
could ask for escalated review by Commerce.
Well, and I can ask that you continue to review it with the legal counsel office as well. But that's what they said. It's gonna take us 2 weeks to review and then legal review is gonna take even longer. So we wanted to get something back.
What would you think would happen if you said that the potential pool members, you can join the pool, but you don't get a vote? The only voting member in Scott County.
I think that would have, one, you have to have a minimum of 3 members on the board of trustees, if I remember correctly. And if we could only have 1 member, then we would only be one of the 3 votes.
We'd have to tell them, you get to vote of, these 5 or 6 entities get to vote for the 2 other members, but they don't each get their own. That would be allowed under the rules right now.
But I think that was one of the things is that when they've joined other pools, they don't get any insight into the black box, right? They just get told, here's what you need to pay and this is what it is. And so part of that was the access and the having to have a voice in the decision-making process.
I mean, the weighted voting, the last service delivery, I missed one on Monday. The weighted voting was sort of an understood thing, looking around the table. I mean, I asked specifically.
That was decided quite a while
We're over that, like, let's move forward.
Very clearly, even at Elko Newmarket, when Commissioner Wolf and I were there with the mayor and Tom, they understood they're gonna get 1 vote, and county might have how many. But they were okay with
Yeah.
that, as long as they could sit at the table and be part of the discussion.
You know, they said something on Monday. Just like the eloquent, they said, we still have to review stuff before we're in, even if you, apart from the weighted voting. What did they want to review, what the joint powers terms or?
Well, the JPA and the bylaws, but we also were the ones that had requested some changes to the JPA and bylaws and We just went ahead and made them based on the board direction, then sent them out for their feedback on it.
Okay.
Based on the direction from the board, because really the rationale has been if Scott County wasn't in this,
Right.
and now Carver County is a different question, it wasn't gonna move forward. And so if the board was concerned about something, we tried to include that in the JPA and the bylaws.
And that language has been out there for months now.
The original language has been, we did have some updates. We had a meeting with Darcy and Gallagher, they're experts on their pools. And they had some additional language suggestions that we wanted to include in the most recent version we sent out.
Okay. So if I could, I want you to test me on my saying what Dave Hempsey said. Okay, this is Monday. He was at the meeting. He said, this weighted voting, issue seems to be, potentially a deal breaker. Okay, that's one thing to say. Then I questioned later. I said, Dave, you know, that you essentially said potentially a deal breaker, the weighted vote. But is your board on board with the pool, or are your unions, do you know the position of your board or your unions on this? No, I don't. So I said, so you know what a deal breaker is, but you don't really know if you're in it, you're in at all. And that was basically, unchallenged, that, you know, that is the case. And then he said, at some point in the conversation, he said, maybe this looked promising, maybe 28 or 29 for us. So maybe 28 or 29 looks promising. That's the level of commitment right now. From Carver.
I don't know the conversations he's had with his board. I know
I'm just,
one of
I'm
his,
saying what
yeah.
he said, what we talked about and what he specifically
Yes.
said on Monday.
yes,
Is that right?
yes.
Am I accurate? Okay.
I think the weighted voting question in and of itself is probably a deal breaker for everybody. Like if, you know, let's say, you know, what does Credit River have, three bodies, 3 employees, and let's say they got families, so we got 6, but I think they would say, this doesn't make sense. But it
Well,
feels like
Reynolds said he hoped we will go forward with weighted voting.
without weighted voting.
He said, I see, Reynolds said, I hope you'll still go forward.
Yeah, I think Shakopee wants to go forward no
They're
matter.
ready, yeah, they're like, yeah.
And, Prior Lake was very disappointed. How would we lose a whole legislative session over this issue? And Jason had to be informed, and you did, that no, we were tracking towards a legislative change. You explained that all the time. He thought we didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Apparently. Yeah, but you explained it.
Who thought we had?
So, Jason from Prior Lake Woodell.
Can I just say one thing here? This was a scale initiative. Where were they? I'm just gonna ask that question. We had been asking questions. We have been raising the issues, doing all the research. This was a scale initiative. Where were they in talking to Senator Pratt, Representative Bakeford, Representative Tapke?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's been some discussions. I don't know the when, the why, the where. I know the why. But no, I mean, that's even a bigger question of the whole scale, you know, is scale or is scale kind of county? Is it, you know, which is a little bigger and over and above this particular topic, but it is, you know, people always used to not like what I said, and I didn't mean anything negative, but it's like, I would love for scale to be as cool as the people on the outside think it is. Just because there's human dynamics, and it wasn't a negative thing, it's just, we all know our own.
It is just cool because you can say things like we're saying and we know.
It's awesome.
But we're the only ones who can do, we need to make it now.
Exactly.
But I just.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a capacity issue. and,
It's-
like, Let's do it.
Yes. It's a comedy, I mean, it's like a human dynamic, right, in your own family.
Yeah.
You're building relationships, you're mending fences, you're, you know.
So where are we at on your presentation here?
Oh, right.
So the next thing I was gonna go over is some of the larger joint powers agreement changes from our discussion. So, within that JPA, we increased the required meetings to quarterly within there, with more meetings to be able to be set. We strengthened the language, the ability to remove members for failure to perform their responsibilities, including showing up to meetings, having a representative, those sorts of things as well. We added financial penalties for members being expelled from the pool, and an expel would also include a member attempting to leave before their 5-year commitment. So that is, the way it's written, you can't leave the pool before 5 years. If you stop paying into it and get expelled from it, then there's a penalty for that expulsion. But now someone doesn't leave, they were expelled from the pool at that point. Adds language and the formula for weighted voting within there. And then there are other minor clarifying languages that we had, just making sure something was called out. Finance policies, some of those sorts of things where they're established within the board.
Danny, do we have drafts? Do we, the commissioners, have?
Share drafts with you,
Yeah, I think that would be Wax, please.
Okay.
Bylaws and the agreement, yeah.
So we've got Gallagher in the room. I saw some head nods to some of these points. But one question I have is, there's that 5-year commitment.
Mhm.
If somebody bails or they're expelled, there's this penalty, but is there teeth to it? Or is it just like?
Financial, right?
What, 3 months, I think, premiums that they had to pay in? So that's a pretty substantial penalty for someone.
And then early on, just again, just more for just clarification, but because we have a reserve for backing up our, because we've been doing this. Most of these folks are not gonna have that. There was a question, I think. And I don't remember exactly the answer, so I want to ask it now. So let's say we're all jumping in the deep end, or we can have a shallow end, a deep end, because we all have our different plans. Our reserves that we've accounted for over the years, that's not subsidizing another pool or another, not another pool, but another,
Entity.
yeah, shallow end,
Member.
deep end, whatever.
No.
So they have to,
So the way it's structured right now is we have to pre-fund 3 months, so it builds up an automatic reserve. One of the discussions that the work group would be called, but the board has to discuss is what is gonna be the reserve policy for the pool. Do we need to build one up? But that would be everybody having to contribute to that reserve pool.
Now, we have, to my knowledge, 6 months of reserve. If we're going to pool, we need 3 months. What's gonna happen
Oh,
in
yeah.
the remaining 3 months?
So that's the pre-funding. So that would be something that was already budgeted, right? We already budget putting money into that pool. We could use our insurance pool, but more likely it's gonna be, what do we contribute for those first 3 months of the year? January, February, March, and pay that into the pool just from county funds.
So I just wanna say this, this is my commentary. Okay, we've got this weighted voting issue to be resolved. If that's resolved, my opinion, it'll be very difficult, nearly impossible to say for any other reason that we're not gonna do this. Already, you know, Prior Lake has budgeted savings in their budget over this. And so if we resolve the weighted, we're gonna have to go forward. You can't say, well, no more looks good because Carver's not in. No, you're gonna have to go forward because you've created almost an ironclad expectation that the only remaining issue is the weighted voting. So I mean, that's kind of where we're at right now. So almost.
What
You feel it's wrong for me to say that? Or-
I would feel like if that is their expectation, then they have not been listening to what we've been saying throughout this process. So we have had the board say, you can continue to move forward, we can be part of the feasibility study. Well, actually, one of the requests we have today is for more definitive direction from the board as whether we should continue this or not. And as we go through this, like, that's kind of that final either recommendation, but that's what we want out of this, because the question keeps coming up, so is Scott County in or not? And we keep saying, we have not had a board decision on that
Okay,
yet.
well, I think we're kind of understanding, but Jason Waddell has already said, what do you mean you're not? Well, if we put all this work in this, you can't not go forward. I mean, he
But
said
that's just
that,
his opinion.
Huh?
He keeps saying
I
that,
think
yeah.
but I'm just saying that's, and I don't think Reynolds is far behind on that kind of
I
statement.
just know that I've been part of several meetings where we've been pretty clear on that, and I'm not even at all the scale services meetings, but everyone I've been at, our board has not told us this is the direction we are going yet. They've just given us permission to keep exploring it with the rest of the group.
Yeah, I'm just saying the net result of fine tuning the bylaws to the nth degree and doing all this creates an expectation. This is for sure gonna happen.
That honestly was intended to meet the timelines that we had to try and make a 1/1/27 timeframe work.
Yeah.
We didn't know what the legislative avenue was going to present and the challenges it did. But in order to make that 1/1/27 timeline work, we had to have those things underway and worked on. So,
I'm not faulting
oh no,
what you
it's,
said or done or talked internally. I'm just saying,
Yep.
where I feel it's out there. expectations with potential pool partners.
I would say I get that sense as well, but I don't think that it's a fair sense because we have been pretty consistent. Our board has not weighed in on this beyond saying you can continue to work on it. So,
Right, I think you're both, like, what you're both saying is correct. I think there is an expectation. But I think it's also true that we have not made a board decision and we continue to communicate
I
that.
agree 100% with what's been said on both sides.
Yeah,
So from a Gallagher perspective, with where we're at on this journey, probably not new for your group, since you kind of own that market for the most part. Where are we at? Are we where you expected us to be? There's, the hurdles, the pitfalls, the traps, the, oh shoot, about the language.
I would say two things. I think that we're on track for one, and I think for two, for a pool to be successful, you have to cross your i's and dot your t's before you jump in.
Sure.
And so from that perspective, from, your consultant's perspective, I have appreciated the crossing the i's and dotting the t's. And to your point, getting all those things in line, they have to be in line before you jump in, because once you're in, the bylaws are gonna hold true, the JPA is gonna hold true. The three reasons why a pool would fail is you don't follow your bylaws that you already set forth. You don't take your actuary's advice in where you set your premiums, or you don't, rate your groups individually to a degree. And all three of those things are what Gallagher recommends that you do, and we are doing. So for one, just because we're all together, there is a banded layer, we are sharing risk, but groups are still rated on their individual experience to a degree. So just because Scott County gets X increase does not mean the three people at Credit River get the same. We are rating, there is a risk layer where we share, but you also get rated on your experience. So that's one thing we have in place. The second thing is if you don't follow your bylaws, that's why we have to go through the exercise of, let's sit everybody down. What are the reserve recommendations? Does everybody pay in to start with? Or do we start with no reserve and just the 3 months of pre-funding? And, a pool could fail if they don't, abide by their own laws that they set forth in reserve recommendations. And then the third thing is your actuary's advice, right? If Gallagher says in this pool, you need an X% increase, and someone says, well, we think that we can beat that and we're gonna go 3% below, it's gonna catch up to you. And I think those are the three things that, all of this due diligence has checked the box to make sure that you are set up for success in a pooled arrangement. And that is Gallagher's perspective as well. Like, we want to set you up for success.
I'm not understanding one aspect here. You said the pool partners, they're individually rated.
Mhm.
It seemed like in one of the more recent Gallagher presentations, it was like a blank behind the curtain that we couldn't see.
Yep.
Anything about the potential pool partners. So I'm trying to reconcile those two things.
Yes, good question. So after that presentation that I think you're thinking of, we did share, we pulled off that blue box and we showed what everyone's increase would be.
Yep.
So it was, Jordan going into the pool would be actually 7% higher than if they were out of the pool. And Scott County had advantage of like roughly a percent or two going into the pool. And so we did share that. And so
I presented that for our feasibility study with that. That was the information provided by Gallagher.
Did we see that? Okay, I just don't remember that.
So in that meaning, we didn't originally show it. We're happy to show it. Every pool operates differently. We're happy to have that transparency. And that transparency is true. Not every group is, that would hold true going into the pool initially, as well as at renewal time. We calculate it as a whole. There's a banded layer. We share risk there. And below that banded layer, you're still being rated independently as well.
Did you have did you present on Carver, their number?
Mhm.
What was it?
They had a pretty substantial decrease.
Yeah, I think their savings was about 16 to 17% going into the pool.
Okay.
The one that was all of the scale partners and Carver and Scott, but not Dakota, it showed a 18.5% reduction in their rates.
And that's for a couple of reasons. One, everybody gains benefit from the banded layer, sharing risk of those high cost claimants. But two, another advantage that the particular entity sees going into the pools, they're in a fully insured environment right now. They'd be going to self-funded pool. So there's instant savings when you go from fully insured to self-funded, but making that jump, you have to be prepared. You have to have the reserves built up because you have to be prepared for that worst case scenario. And they haven't been able to make that jump in the past for a variety of different reasons, so.
So when we were last in Jordan, I know it was Bell playing me yesterday, when we had that Jordan meeting, that's when the report was sort of, the gross report, I shouldn't use that word. The mass report.
Yep.
With the blue screen, not like the Wizard of Oz.
Mhm.
So after that meeting, you removed the veil and you went and you had individual meetings with the entities.
Yep.
So every jurisdiction, watershed cities, had a one-on-one meeting with Gallagher
Mhm.
to go over their very specific information.
Mhm.
So they would know their run rise, so to speak, their up and down. They would know potential, what they would need to bring to the table for the reserve as well, or
So that piece of the conversation, many of them had questions on that, and the Gallagher response is, yes, that's determined by the pool. From a Gallagher recommendation perspective, it's always best to go in with healthy reserves,
yeah,
1 to 3 months. However, with that said, based on statute, like Danny said, the statute says you pre-fund 3 months of your premium. So they're not requiring any additional payment in, but that's a decision that the members that go into this pool have to decide. Are we gonna pre-fund a month in addition to our 3 months? Or are we going to go with the cash flow of upfronting 3 months and let it run out?
and we haven't gone down that road of checking the box with all the jurisdictions that want in, like, hey, do you have the capacity to do whatever that number is?
That's the next conversation, right now, we had, and we brought this up at scale yesterday. We need the policymakers at the table for finalizing the JPA bylaws. We had really good people who were really good at the technical things of administering it. But it was not people who could make a decision and say, yes, we're gonna do this or that. So after today, whether we're in or out, there's a work group of those who are in the pool that need to start finalizing what this looks like for them.
So the other question I have, so we have Darcy, right, supposedly the subject matter expert when it comes to the attorney side of things. You have Gallagher, part of me is wondering, I know there was, some changeover, some helping, like life happens, I get it. But moving forward, are you, like, as our guide, like, you and her as our guide that have been there, done that with all of our, and when I say all of our, I'm not talking about just county, like the scale, all these different jurisdictions. All of our documentation seem right, like we're adding some of these things towards the end. Because part of me is wondering, you can tell your kids, like, hey, don't do this, this probably isn't beneficial for you, but sometimes they kind of have to stub their own toe to like learn that. So my question is, are we being guided in this, knowing that we have some stubbing of the toes coming? And we have to learn that on our own, or did we miss something along the way from a hired gun that said, don't do this, don't do this, because.
I think we're being guided now. I think in the last month or so, we've had Gallagher more engaged in looking at some of these JPAs. We're talking back when the first 2 meetings that we had of the group that put together the JPA and bylaws, we spent the entire time talking about what a pool was, how it would work from the administrative side. And it wasn't until that 3rd meeting that we had to get to some of the policy questions and big points. And from there, as I'll say a little bit, had Colleen be stably as our representative and then had the other pool folks engaged, that's where we've been getting we would strongly recommend this be included in that. But that's what we're saying. It needs to shift to the people who are gonna be part of the pool at this point, not Scott County saying, these are the minimum things we would need to consider this.
I'm struggling to how to think about the savings, the potential savings. I mean, in a different setting, I think of somebody being told that the lease payment on a car is $599, but if you put $4,000 down in the 3 years lease, your payment will only be $299, and you'll save $300, you're just prepaying the extra money. So I'm just wondering how to think about this in this setting. I mean, if you're having to bring 3 months reserves and then you're self-funding, how much, I mean, what's the real savings? I mean, you know,
The pre-funding is just to have reserves, so when those payments start coming in that first month, it's not prepaying
Yeah.
anything, it's just the pool having reserves for the first.
and okay, break that off for just a second.
Yeah.
What kind of dollars are you talking about for like Jordan or a reserve that they have to bring to the field? Have anybody balked at that number?
I don't know that for individual areas.
Do they know the number?
We've told them that reserves, based on whatever the pool sets, could be anywhere from, we're all just pre-funding our first 3 months and we're gonna continue to build up a slow reserve as a pool. Or the pool, the members at the table, who's committed, could be anywhere from 1 to 3 months of premiums.
In addition to the reserve.
In addition,
That's what I want to clarify.
so right now, as the statutes are written, to start a pool, you have to pre-fund 3 months of premium. That's just so that you have cash flow to pay claims.
Right.
You don't have to even put in 3 additional months of, you're just, think about it as, you're just pre-funding 3 months of insurance to this pool out the gate. Gallagher's recommendation is even if you pre-fund 3 months and you have an additional payment, so you start payments in February so that everyone paid 1 more month of premium in the full 12 months, that sets you up for, you now have 1 whole month of premiums from everybody that's technically reserved. And so with that being said, folks on the line, they understand that there's pre-funding needed. The addition to reserves, we've said 1 to 3 months of premium is typical. So
What are those two buckets called? Is there like an official title, like the 1 to 3 months premium,
that's like a pre-fund, that's like a state statute that they
Okay.
require is what I'm.
pre-fund, and then there's reserve.
Right.
An additional
Right,
1 to
right.
3, just for.
It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
It all goes into the same bank account. It's going, instead of having just 3 months of reserves when you start out day one,
Right.
you put an additional month in.
No, and I get it. I'm just thinking for words matter and common language and.
And the point of this is to avoid a cash call.
Sure,
Saying,
of
hey,
course.
our premiums are high, it's gonna be a bigger amount of dollars for this next thing, everyone has to pay in more on this month. We're in an okay position on this, but the other cities, I think that's the discussion where it needs to happen there with that group.
So, and the question was, do they know that, they being the cities, and the answer was sort of.
They know, they don't just have the amount of, this is exactly what that dollar amount is gonna be.
They understand the 1 to 3 pre-fund and then the 1 to 3 reserve. Okay. And that sounds like it's the next step.
Well, that sounds like,
Part of the next
it sounds like almost a potential deal breaker right there. If the number's too large, they can't do that.
Well, if you talk to several of them, they've already put the money away for it. I mean, Shakopee has been saving to do this. Melissa said that. I think that Fire Lake has been saving to do that. So they're in different positions and I don't know about the smaller cities. I didn't have that discussion.
And they may be in a position where they're like, no, we prefer a cash call if the money's needed, and the pool will just build up reserves over time. Because again, this is gonna be a legally binding document that if we need more money from the members of the pool as we get into month 3, we have to contribute.
They're required.
Then they're required to contribute their portion.
Well, and I just, again, words matter. You said we, pointing to yourself, like the county is not necessarily digging into their funds to help out, let's say Blakely. I know they're not even, but just a small portion.
I mean, at some point it will be pooled resources though, right? Like we have to think of it as the pool, but we would only pay our portion to that pool.
For a head nod.
That's accurate. And as the pool, over time, the pool will build reserves
Right.
based on how the funding is set.
But we will all have our own little T account, so to speak, of like, oh, we have this reserve.
You know, it's not gonna be, here's the Scott County Reserve and here's this reserve. It's the pooled reserves. But we all have to follow the same policy. Just like the majority of the premiums that get paid out of here and the cost for this will be Scott County's. If we were to be a member of this from the beginning. Like,
Scott County will have a second reserve.
Yes, we'll have-
Because we have to, and I'll say this wrong, but we have to decommission our current state. And those have specific rules on how that funding is set aside and then can be used towards our group's insurance.
This is where the sometimes, maybe we benefit from the pool being, and sometimes
Sure. And, you know, go back to that Jordan meeting where there was, I forget exactly what was, some of the smaller cities were like, wow, I thought you guys had this tool that we're just gonna kind of tell us to a high degree of, you know, I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was some tool, some software tool that were going to give us this, like, and where I'm going with that, I don't necessarily want to revisit that, but moving forward, like here we are with Gallagher. Not with like, you know, Jim Johnson's insurance are us. Like you and your team feel supremely confident in these numbers.
Yeah, Gallagher manages over 60 pools across the nation, and they have yet to have a pool ever fail.
Right, no, I remember that.
And I mean, when you go into an arrangement like this, so I'll just, for a brief stint, I left Gallagher and I actually went and worked on a pool. And I can tell you firsthand, your consultant and who puts that pool together is gonna dictate your success. And you have to be set up for success if it's gonna be successful. And so I'm confident in Gallagher's ability to do that.
Yeah, I mean, just one of the things that, you know, when this was first, I think your predecessor was sitting in about that spot, like, well, it's gonna be this is where the debate, the 1%, well, it was always 2, it was always 2, well, whatever, 1 or 2%. And my disdain for healthcare and the trajectory it's on, it's like, it's awful. I mean, it's not sustainable. What was it, like 20+% of the GDP? So where's healthcare gonna, you know, the healthcare is not necessarily gonna shrink and go away. But although something, and then Barb, you were sitting down there in that corner, it's like, hey, in 5 years, 10 years, this is gonna be, like, it has to look different because it can't go down this track. It just can't. I mean, which is true of so many different things. And so you know, and yes, the waiting voting was always a big deal for me. It's just governance, right? Not necessarily, I've said it before in these meetings and service delivery. It's not about the faces around the room now. It's the faces around the room in 10 years, 55 years, whatever.
That structure.
And so with everything we've just recently gone through with the state, session just closed. Got a lot of like confetti in the air, it feels like, and a lot of pom-poms and ribbons that fell off them, but it's like, at the end of the day, like, you still got dust in the corner. Not a lot of great, yeah, not the worst of the worst, but you can kind of see it from there. So, and we're talking with Dakota, we're talking with Carver, we're having joint meetings, we're doing things with Hennepin County, like how do we leverage software? Like, we are in a spot, the collective we, it feels like counties are in a spot to where we need to find every little thing that we can to try to leverage. And yeah, I understand the city's, you know, the stability and the reliability and all those things. I'm really excited about potential for a Carver, maybe Dakota, I don't know. But to give us some of those numbers that actually will still help us all. You know, it's not the end all be all, or they have to confirm by, you know, June 9th if they're in or not. But that's just the world we're living in. The state doesn't seem to be making it sustainable, anything. So, and I believe in my heart of hearts that we are about outcomes. We are about hope and transformation in relationships. Even when it's not always reciprocated all the time, but that's the human dynamic, that things like this give us potential for savings, give us potential for, especially the quarterly meetings versus once a year, you know, no one wants to herd cats over this. The members, I wouldn't think would want to herd cats over this.
And Danny, I mean, that's one of my questions, because it goes back to education and people understanding it when they make decisions. I'm assuming maybe in the first year, you might even be meeting monthly or for the first several years, right?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of education that needs to be done with this group. There's a lot of business decisions that need to be made.
I would add that to the bylaws if we're, I mean, or some asterisk or something, because
So there is, I mean, they can be set much more regularly. It's just mandating 4 meetings a year.
well, I'm just saying some of that stuff out of the chute, why don't you just do it for the first 18 months. I mean, some other committees and programs are still too fresh to be like, ooh, that was painful. And
I'll send out the draft of the bylaws. There's more opportunity for feedback, but we don't even know if we're gonna be part of this.
No, I know, but I just,
So,
Right.
let's not take things for granted. It's just,
Yeah.
put some stuff
And
in.
bylaws, you want them to last a long time, that, I mean, that can be an agreement that you can have, that for the first year, we're gonna meet every month.
Yeah,
But
right.
I don't know that we need to.
Totally. You don't major on the minor.
so going back to what we had talked about previously, joining an insurance pool in general is one of the few things we can do to reduce cost increases without reducing insurance benefits with a new organization, right? We have, the other one is plan design changes, which we're actually contemplating for this year already with the addition of the HSA. Spreads risk out a larger pool. It doesn't reduce our existing costs. I think that's what we have to keep in mind. It bends the curve down. So Commissioner Beer had asked me for a 10-year chart on what the impact of this could be. So using our current renewal, and this is coming from the scale pool numbers, not the ones that we got specifically based on our current state, but the scale pool. So we're looking apples to apples, what the difference would be for that starting number for 2027. This is then inflated 8% for the current and 7% for the pool costs. And what that savings would be if there was a 1% savings each year. So that annual savings is not compounded. That is the actual savings. So you get out 10 years, and there's a $3.6 million difference just on a 1% reduction in our increases.
And I just want to be, Captain Obvious. Would be specifically the Scott County portion. Even
This is based on Scott County's information that we got from the scale. This is what your current renewal will be. This is what we'd expect your renewal to be. This includes, I believe, Dakota County being in there.
I'm
But
just saying
not,
these, oh, okay.
yeah, but this is ours for 2027, what that renewal would be based on what Gallagher had provided us for the feasibility study.
But with the caveat that it does include Dakota, which was like a couple thousand. So if that wasn't part of it, and Carver wasn't part of it, we should probably look at that too.
It'd be different, but I think the point here is, and that number would be different where it starts. It's $263,000 here difference. That's not a huge amount in terms of our budget. But when you start looking at a compounding of that rate over the year, and I think that goes back to, I think it was at the very first presentation on pools, it bends
Yep.
that trajectory down,
Yep.
and the longer you're in it, the longer that trajectory impacts and the compounding effect happens.
Totally get that. I'm just saying it would be helpful, just to have the,
Carver
so-
and Dakota are just nothing more than a maybe.
Yep, and I,
We've had one meeting with Dakota County and we talked about this pool for like 1 minute. And it was, the board chair raised significant questions from Dakota County.
yeah,
We didn't talk about it at all hardly with our first meeting with Carver either. And I don't even know if it's gonna be on the agenda in the next meeting. I mean. And they're saying maybe 28, 29. So any numbers that include Carver
Yeah.
and Dakota are just like bogus. So.
I'm not
please
trying to
stop
play this
including-
based on,
Please stop including DeCarver and Dakota in any projections, because they're a big maybe.
yes, I agree. The point of this was not to show by having the pool, we're gonna get this immediate savings. It was to show that the compounding impact of this is a substantial amount of dollars over a 10-year time frame. So if you look at even just a 0.1% change in that number over 10 years, you're still talking $5.1 million in savings. And that's a fraction of a 1% saving, a tenth of that.
But to John, I mean, I get the compounding, the exercise, we're trying to show, but now looking at Gallagher, I think you called him the Carver. Maybe that's a new,
I called somebody DeCarver.
well, no, just, another, yeah, Scott DeCarver, anyway, but the numbers are gonna be different. I understand the compounding exercise is gonna be similar, but the numbers are gonna be different. So to John's point, it's like, don't show me,
But, and it
16.7.
is not gonna be a smooth increase like this. We are going to have different variability year to year, right? So this is showing a trend. This is saying trending a average 1% savings over that time or a 0.1% savings. That's why I have the two,
Yeah.
some more extremes in there. Is that is the reason we're contemplating this. It is a cost control benefit for the county.
And Gallagher, at the expert in the room, again, not Jim Johnson's Insurance R Us, like, I would love, like, if there's anything you hear us say or not say that makes you cringe or like, ooh, like that would be a great time.
No, I can just reiterate what Danny said, a pool, and I will say this and say it again, and I've said it at the scale meetings independently with each individual organization. A pool is not a silver bullet to change healthcare. It is not
Shoot,
the
shoot.
silver bullet. I'm the first one to say that. However, it will curb the cost. Because as we continue to go down and there are new cell and gene therapies and these $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 million claimants, just a single person in 1 year, it's going to exponentially get harder to control your costs when you don't link together. It's not impossible, but it's gonna be more possible, and you're gonna have a smoother ride if you can link arms together and ride that wave to mitigate those high cost claimants. Because to your earlier point, healthcare isn't getting any rosier or better. And frankly, it's gonna go the opposite direction. And so how can we help band together and bend that cost curve, even if it's just that 1 to 2% a year, knowing we're gonna still fluctuate between there. But you're doing everything you possibly can to get the best stop loss contract, the best TPA, all of those
Okay,
things.
I could ask. a question.
Yeah.
On the topic of nimbleness,
Mhm.
okay, obviously, it seems to me obvious that if we're just our own entity, the nimbleness of which we can change the market conditions is greatest when we're on our own. That's one thing. The other thing, in a pool, I mean, we have some experience with our scale members in a joint powers agreement. It's been like herding cats. It's been an awful experience with the RTM. So just, I mean, just saying, you know, that's been the case with RTM. And
I don't, think there's any reason a pool can't be nimble in how we are. The other thing I would say is that this bylaws and the JPA has a lot more teeth in it than anything we have regarding the regional training facility. There's obligations for being a member of this pool.
Well, and that's kind of what I was referring to, like some committees and programs are still a little fresh of like herding cats and like, which is why I said for the first 12 or 18, that maybe you do put it in the bylaws that we're meeting monthly, even if it's virtual for 5 minutes, like, and specify what level or title or whatever needs to be part of this, so that, no, yeah, on something this important, not, that's not important, it's more. But this impacts not just the brown and the blue, but everybody. Plus, to have that, not onerous, you know, who wants a 87-page anything? I don't think it's 87 pages, but to have that, like, we're meeting, you know, you need an elected and administrator, I don't know what the right titles or phraseology is, but consistency and avoiding some of those things that you just talked about.
I would, to the nimbleness comment, I would say you're setting yourself up for success by already meeting more than just twice a year. You're meeting 4 times a year. In the first year, you're gonna meet monthly, if not more than that. You know, those pieces are setting you up for success to be nimble, and from an individual plan standpoint to a scale plan standpoint, the nimbleness, I would say, arguably, you could say, is the same. Yes, you all have to get a vote to change a carrier or change a TPA. However, if there's a heck of a lot of issues with, say, TPA X, Y, and Z, you're all gonna come to the table, make that decision, and move forward with it, no different than you are today, saying, hey, our TPA isn't working, we need to go to bid. Let's make that transition. So the nimbleness is still there, and the meeting cadence is gonna set you up for making sure that you have enough you know, nimbleness within your pool.
The other thing I would say is once we would be set up, we are paying just a flat monthly rate to the pool, and the pool is administering those funds. It's not Scott County having to change the TPA. It's not Scott County having to change X, Y, or Z. If the TPA was not working out, the pool would change, they would pay the TPA, and we would still just be paying the pool from a system perspective. So that actually creates some ease where we're not having to balance. We feel like we need to make a change, but our capacity to make that change is more difficult right now.
I also want to note that from a nimble standpoint, you still have autonomy over your plan designs. So you still have autonomy within the pool. So let's say something isn't working for your staff. A plan design, a copay, a deductible. You still have autonomy over those components. You don't have to get the board's approval to add, let's say for 2027, here we add an HSA plan and we have the standard plan. And then in another year, you want to add another higher deductible HSA. You don't have to get board approval to do that. You still have autonomy to make those decisions to meet your employees' needs.
So, but the other side of that coin, just to be very clear, is so do the others. So as an example, with the weight loss meds, if everybody else decides to do that, they'll cost it in the first year. But all the creek rises because they'll have to wait until we really see what happens with that cost within the pool. And then we'll have to balance that out with costs down the road. As we've talked about that, because they do their best to forecast, okay, Scott County's gonna add whatever the latest and greatest medical thing is. But those costs have to go into the pool and then get balanced. That's how you win. And you can, like, you're in it together for good and for
But even
some of the
with that,
trade-offs.
some of those plan designs are actually captured in the, before you get to, and I wish I had that chart as part of the presentation, the individualized renewal rate. Because every organization has its individualized renewal rate based on what they're doing in the pool. It's that banded layer that captures the high cost claimants, and then there is the stop loss instead. So if you remember the chart that has the blue, the tan, the orange, and then the administrative costs. If the pool decided and they wanted to cover GLPs, it ends up being about what that group does impacts their rates as well. So they would see that impacted, and if Scott County didn't, we wouldn't have that same impact. It was gonna impact some, Lori's not wrong.
Sure.
But there is still some of that individual experience that drives some of those costs.
Because when we talk about GLP-1s, just anecdotally, that banded layer is set up currently between, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's 50 and 225. Any one claimant that exceeds 50, you're now in the shared risk portion. When we talk about GLP-1s, they're expensive, $20,000 to $30,000 per member per year. But to Lori's point, they're gonna be rated on that out the gate. And so if they're in excess of that, their renewal is gonna reflect that as well. Yes, the pool is paying for it, but their renewal will also reflect their usage of that benefit. And some of those benefits are going to be determined by the TPA and others won't. I mean, that is a major formulary change. If our formulary allows for us to do it dependent on group, they may not. And those bigger cost or dollar item pieces that you could make a plan design change, it may be subject to the TPA overall. So.
And so there's a couple pieces to that. To Lori's point, yes, if it is a TPA control and a formulary change that we also, because if we want to cover, we may not have the ability to say, we don't want to cover weight loss drugs as Scott County and everyone else decides they want to, then yeah, that's going to be a benefit because that's going to impact our experience as well. But those are some of the decisions that is the other side of this coin, right? What are the things that we lose control over on some of those things?
Since you're flanked by ER, and we've been, getting a new system for the last few years, just from an implementation perspective, both in the middle there,
Yep.
internally or externally and internally. Cause I know dates out a little bit would be better for just logistics with the new system. With however this is gonna go, how are you feeling internally? And then how are others feeling? I mean, it's kind of I'm asking one question, I'm really asking multiple because the cities and jurisdictions will have to answer that too. Because there's implementation of this just from a software and administration and accounting.
I've been, I think, open in several meetings that I think the 1/1/28 is the path, what's the path forward, even prior to the legislative issues from a stand, because as I've said before, if you're gonna do a thing, let's do it right, and I want this to succeed. I don't want to sort of tumble forward. The more, what we've heard about with the rules and commerce and legislation that some of what our the counterparts in this have said, between anecdotally what you've shared, Commissioner Ulrich, about Dakota and Carver being maybes. I think the 1128 makes more sense to me, because other groups have to sort their issues out. One of my counterpart in Dakota County is Andy Benish. I'd spoken to him some time ago, and he was very wrapped up in labor issues and union issues, and which suggests to me they may not have even begun engaging to the level we already have. So I hope I'm not surprising anyone here, I don't think, but 1128 has been my position for some time, for the reasons you're saying, and I'll defer down below.
So, okay, if Dakota and Carver did come in,
Mhm.
you know, that brings a positive, you know, the larger pool. It also makes us, our voice next to nil.
I think we still have a substantial vote, and either of those circumstances, just based on, because nobody can have more than 40%, and it's based on percentage. So it doesn't say because Dakota had 40%, they got all of that, right? In the calculations, we would still have additional votes, and Carver would as well. Well, none of the cities would have those additional votes.
Well, nil is an overstatement.
Yeah.
It would greatly reduce our voice.
If we go down this route, yeah, it's not perfect. There's obviously things we'd be giving up, so it's kind of a balance if you feel like it's a good, like, let's be realistic like that. It's not like we should be saying, oh, this is the perfect, most wonderful thing. But yeah, there's pros and cons, and I think it's an evaluation thing, like, for me, because of how much I really think the whole industry is gonna change in the future, it's like the pros outweigh the cons, because I think so many of the bad things that we're relying on are gonna change anyways in the future. I don't think we can count on the past and how this all worked in the past with health insurance to influence this decision that much. So that's why I'm where I'm at. Other people around the table might be like, no, I don't, because that's just an opinion. I don't think so, Barb. I think control is our most important thing. So I don't think we're gonna come to, here's the perfect route. There are pros and cons, and we're gonna evaluate those different. And frankly, kind of fun to be in a situation where we're probably gonna have different thoughts on this. We
So-
usually get to yes. We're not gonna get to 5 yeses here. That's okay.
That's good. Hey, Jeff,
Or 5 no's.
you said something, I'm being told nimbleness is not an issue at all. You said some things pretty strong about nimbleness in one of our last meetings.
Yeah.
Can you say what you said again?
What I said before, it was, sorry, I think I'm literally getting sick, so we sit here.
Oh,
I'm so sorry, everyone.
Everyone's moving.
Kick him out of the pool.
Insurance.
Quick.
Thanks.
I apologize. Yeah, given what we were talking about, I believe that we were having a conversation in one of the last meetings about, with the changing nature of healthcare, it might be better to be in a larger pool with more stability. And I simply said, I think the opposite might also be true, that in a changing landscape, it might be better to be more nimble, have less of a layered decision-making process so you can pivot more easily. Now, in fairness, both Colleen and Danny, and my own, looking into this, there are a number of things in the structure that address that concern, right? Our own, the individual entities having their own plan design issues. So it's more the finances tying us together, individual rating. Those are all, again, fair points. But, sir, I think to your point, just as a level set statement, the more autonomy you have, the more flexible you can be if you don't have any partners, right? The man that lives alone eats whatever he wants at night. He doesn't have a spouse or children whose wants and needs he needs to concern. Is that necessarily bad? And is he, devoid of flexibility? No. So, I mean, that was my point earlier, and I did it less to advocate for one way or another, and more to simply say that there is always another side to it's my little soapbox. You have the misfortune of being at that LMC with me, right? You can look at a thing and you can flip it around and look at it another way, and things have different significance. And so that was my point there. again, I want to be fair to others in this conversation that there are things which do address that concern. But yeah, I mean, I've been an HR director for a health insurance company. I've worked as an attorney and an HR person for health and hospital systems. Healthcare is a very strange thing in this country, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and there are a lot of strictures and problems. And so that is something that is important, a certain level of flexibility. Now, if whichever direction that the board wants to go and the county wants to go, we'll do our level best to make sure it is successful. And there are, again, as Commissioner Brecky said, pros and cons. There are two sides to this.
So I'm gonna ask a tough question, Gallagher. Gallagher,
Your name's Colleen, by the way.
Colleen.
Well, it's just nice to, like.
I'll go by Gallagher.
okay, I'm just branding you as Gallagher.
Mr. Arthur J. Gallagher.
Yeah.
How is Gallagher compensated in this case? Are you compensated the same whether we have a pool or not? If we go with a pool, does Gallagher receive more funding? Well, how are you compensated?
Yeah, that's a fair question and I'm happy to answer that. So Gallagher currently on Scott County's plan is compensated on a flat fee per year, paid, I believe, quarterly. Going into the pool arrangement, Gallagher's compensation would be tied to a flat fee and it's per member per month. And that would be the same across every single member. So everyone is paying the same. And so when we look at compensation, admittedly, of course, my compensation would increase if I take on 12 more new clients because it's one large pool. But from the standpoint of Scott County paying more or less, you won't pay any more. You won't pay any less because that's built into your rate.
No, I was just trying to get at the
Yeah.
concept that if you go to a pool, you get compensated more, so you have a
Because I would have-
interest in us doing it. You have a financial interest in us saying yes to a pool.
I have made it very clear that I am okay if the county goes with the pool or without the pool. The reason why my compensation would increase is because I'd be taking on additional groups that I don't currently consult with.
I get
Yeah.
that, but I just wanted to understand whether your position is completely neutral. You don't care either way. That's not the case. You have a financial, if we have a pool, you've taken a whole bunch more clients in small companies.
Correct.
So what, did you say it's 30% is the number?
The fee would be set through once we finalize RFP processes.
And about what is that now?
In the feasibility, I have to go back to my numbers, but I believe it's set at 20 or 25 per employee per month. But again, we build that in a feasibility study because if the stop loss comes in higher, that gives us, we're building in buffer there to account for any additional expenses. And we would be very transparent in regards to what that number would be. And we would share that with the members at the table on the board, and that would be a negotiable item, right, with Gallagher.
So that's one point here. So the recommendation coming from Leslie and I is that we would move forward and tell the rest of the group that we intend to be part of the scale health insurance pool coverage effective 1/1 of 28. And we should fully engage with the working group, which would become the board of trustees, because we need to establish the final languages for the JPA and bylaws that we talked about. That needs to be done by the final group that's interested in being part of the pool. There's an RFP process and selection of board service providers. We have service company, financial administrator, trust company, that all needs to be done before we even get to the third-party administrator for the pool. So that's what Colleen's talking about. Those are decisions that have to be made when she talks about that percentage. It's who are we going with that? That's RFP process for each one of those things. From there, we also want to continue working on the legislative change regarding the waiting vote, because that has been a big piece. We're not asking you to take a vote today, but for me to want to continue, and I've already tried to pass off more of this coordination here just in the last couple of weeks to Colleen, because we've been playing both sides of this, needing to be evaluating Scott County's perspective as well as trying to help move this along, to Leslie's point a little bit, where the rest of the members been. Part of that's been driven by, we're also the big fish in this. If we don't move forward with it, it's not going to move forward. But if we don't want to engage, then we need to back up and say, okay, you guys need to move this forward and make your own decisions on this from here on out. But also, if you want us to engage, we need a little bit clearer direction at this point, as opposed to, well, we'll continue to move forward and see. We need to say, assuming that the weighted voting comes in, that yes, we do plan on doing this on 1/1/28. Not a vote, we're not asking you to sign a JPA at this point or anything like that, but we need some more directive on, yes, this is a good use of our time to continue to pursue it.
What I said about an hour ago, if we proceed, it's gonna be.
It's gonna be more
Yes,
about
other
that.
than weighted voting.
Yep, it is gonna be a lot more along those lines, Commissioner, at least in your staff's perspective.
Well, that, I was gonna add that too, that I think it's important. I mean, and I've said it, I think at a scale, with all the different scale, delivery, exec, tech, blah, blah, general, to over communicate. That moving forward, what does that mean? What does this not mean? You know, I know we record these things, but it's not live stream and the other partners aren't necessarily in the room other than, you know, our Johnson's Insurance or us. So I think communicating what it does mean and what it doesn't mean, every meeting, whatever we do. And then just kind of I guess now logistics. So second-handed, looking at the bottom 2 points, that language. Gallagher, Colleen, is there any, it just feels like that language was never felt like a heavy lift at all. Am I wrong in thinking like there's nothing?
I don't know that it's Colleen's expertise here.
Well, it's 60 volts, it's 60 volts, so I don't know, I don't know if they're like this or they're private or whatever. That just doesn't seem,
Well, so this is I think is what you said, and don't, I hope I don't put words in your mouth. There are only 2 pools in the state of Minnesota set up under this statute. And it was Darcy Heitzman who had set up both of them. And so like, this is a little used statute, and I think even in one of the pools that she set up, they had to go get special legislation
yeah,
to set it up how they wanted to do that. So I don't know if it's a heavy lift or kind of a uncommonly used and known statute even for Department of Commerce, where they're taking a look at this going, I don't know.
And is there any, remedy between now and whatever, it was a January, whatever, session starts early next year? Or is it simply gotta wait for legislation?
I think if we decide to move forward, there is a lot of work to still be done. When we talked, even at scale yesterday, we had a really tight timeline to make 1/1/27. Because we're delaying a year does not necessarily need to take off the pressure, because there are additional things
Oh, I would
that we
think
could
so,
do
yes.
with the
Not-
RFP process.
Yeah.
Our rules, even regardless of the weighting voting, I want to try and push to have Department of Commerce review early, because I don't want to be in October of next year and saying, well, we have an issue with this, you need to go back and
Right.
change it. Like, those
We
are
have to get
things.
the official opinion before moving ahead.
Right, we need to get that. We
Yes.
need their legal.
Right,
And it needs to be bird dog though. Like, if we make a call and then waiting for a call back, that's not,
we, or
That doesn't
email
get it
or
done.
whatever,
or whatever, you know what I'm saying?
yeah. It has
What we
to be-
heard, like, it needs to be like. Bird dog. I think that's the official phrase. And just be super clear. And then,
What I would say right now, I feel like I know where 2 commissioners are on this.
oh, am I one of the 2? Look at that.
I'm not clear on.
You're one of
we
the
have
2?
See that? Look at that.
3 or 4 commissioners
But
saying
we haven't
yes,
told yet, we
Do you
haven't
know
told
that he's
yet.
undecided or?
like.
He keeps talking about the future as if we're going on, so that's why he says that.
I'm trying to say like the stuff we have to do, that would have to be done by this, based on our recommendation, but
Because if we have 3 people who say no, then let's move on and let people
Exactly.
work on their stuff. That's where I think, that's what you're asking for, right?
yeah. I mean, we're at that point where, to Commissioner Ulrich's point, we need to tell our potential partners whether we are in or out, so they can figure out how they move forward.
And I just want to emphasize, over communicate.
Are you voting? What's your vote? Or what's your? what's
I'm
your-
in the 2.
Your
I'm
consent,
in the
okay, okay.
What's the 2 mean?
It's direction.
It's positive.
Yeah, what
People in the-
direction?
Yeah, it's speaking for
Like,
Commissioner
yeah,
Ulrich.
we're not voting, I guess. We're saying, do we agree with the staff
Here's-
recommendation to move?
I am, yeah, health insurance drives me bonkers, this trajectory, like, it's, come on.
The putt, not during.
The state, well, it feels like, I don't know what it is, it's worse, yeah, and the state drives me nuts. And so here we are, we've been talking with our neighbors. I know they're not an absolute for sure, but it gives us some common ground. Like, I like the relationship, I like what potential that means, and I think we all scale would benefit from that, because I know there's some, well, don't get lost in the sauce on a certain county, and I'm not, but I think I'm also excited about that prospect. And I feel like, you know, whether it's 2,000 or 4,000, I don't need absolute control over insurance, because I feel like we have none anyway. I know we do, but we kind of don't. There's bigger organizations with far more people by tens and tens of thousands that deal with this. So that doesn't bother me. The future's more exciting for what could be than, you know, I think that lonely old man, yeah, I said lonely. You said guy living alone in his cabin. I saw him on a cabin in a mountain. That's pretty cool. Can see what he's lonely though. He's lonely. Like, so is he
Just because he
winning?
lives alone doesn't mean he's lonely.
He's
He
lonely.
may seem like-
He's a
Difference
dude.
between being alone and being.
I'll keep mine really short. I think we should continue to look at it. It's not that this is, yes, we're gonna go this way. I'm not saying that, but I think more information and I'm definitely not at a point to say, yes, this is what we're gonna do.
So what was that face?
I feel like it would be helpful to have but for the weighted voting, we intend to be part of the pool by 1/1/28. That is what our potential partners are looking for. It would be helpful to know what more information you would need, Commissioner, because to Commissioner Ulrich's point, when are you guys gonna get to a recommendation is what he asked, I believe, at the last meeting. And so that's what we took the direction to move forward with here.
I think we either have
We
to
can-
join or not join.
Here's what I will say.
We can do another feasibility study. We can do that. The information is not gonna change much. It's kind of, we have the information.
I think it was laid out. I mean, we have to have the legislative change
Yeah.
or direction of the legislator. And that's
Yeah.
like the number one priority, because if it doesn't happen, then we're not gonna go anywhere.
So if that changes, then we would continue to move forward.
So what do you anticipate asking for in weighted voting? I mean, if it was just, you know, Carver and Dakota were out of the picture and you knew the other pool members were certain, then it's more clearly.
I think we have 4 votes to their 5.
Who's five?
The rest of the members each would have
Okay,
one
well, let's
vote.
say Dakota comes in or Carver comes in. We don't ask any-
Carver, and I think we would have 4 and 3. I'd have to pull up the funding for the voting.
Because you're doing proportion.
The proportional.
So the legislation would establish a proportional based on what?
No, we want the legislation to say the JPA can establish the voting,
Yeah.
and we are establishing that no more than 40%.
All right.
I'd be okay with that. Oh, look at that.
So Jody, you're saying you would approve this recommendation with the only limitation being like the weighted voting, the legislative change? Okay, I just
I
think it's
have
good.
3 points. 3 points.
You've used up all of it.
Have I? Well, I just want to be clear, like weighted voting, I've always said that's just bad governance, like, and I think our current partners or potential partners have agreed to that. Weighted voting, the language, right, deal breaker. If there are material changes to these numbers that we've talked about in Jordan or wherever else.
So the material changes, the numbers are going to look different from.
Understood. I get that, but I'm
You mean
saying,
before join? Like, are you saying on your, yes, we should go ahead unless things
yes,
change
Yes.
before?
What
It's
numbers,
done.
what I
well,
guess.
any numbers, take your pick, like, oh,
Like if we found out something was run wrong or,
right, we had these one-offs with Gallagher post Jordan service delivery meeting. You went and met with everybody. So if there's major material changes,
I mean, if there's material mistakes, but I think the entire thing we've been talking about has been, we're going to the pool because it bends the trend down.
understood,
And so,
understood.
but we have partners that don't benefit from this
Understood.
necessarily in year 1 that are
Yep.
still moving forward. So I think we can't say we're in when the numbers look good and we're out.
I'm not saying that.
no, he's saying before we actually get to the starting point. Like if before we get to the starting point, there's a new federal law that says everybody needs to do this and that makes everything look differently.
There's no payment of the state by 300,000, so we need to,
You're
yeah,
not talking about once it starts.
No.
Once we're in,
yeah,
we
it's
can't change
got
it.
5 years. And the third one,
Concerned about moving forward and we don't like the number. I'm confused about what number.
is anyone else confused? Are you?
So
Okay.
what does it mean? So Danny had a number up there that was 19 million something.
I think that needs to be rerun without Scarver or the Carver.
Okay, but we had that.
We had that.
Understood. So I'm just saying, all of those Gallagher numbers from Jordan, if there was some, you know, because the smaller cities without the experience data or whatever it was that they didn't have. So you kind of ran them through
We're
something,
still not gonna have that information
but
because
you presented something to them.
they're doing it based on age and those sorts of things, but when we go out to RFP for a third-party administrator, it's still gonna be, this is the information we have, we're just large enough with Scott County that someone will do a stop loss insurance for us.
I understand these numbers are gonna change, so I'm not
Yeah.
saying that. My interpreter.
I really just think what you're saying is if something changes before 1/1/28, well, before
Like
6,
material
One,
change, something like. holy cow,
27.
That we didn't see.
there's something we didn't see,
Yeah,
some,
yeah.
this, not if it changes by 3%, there's just something we didn't consider, something new.
We live in a
Before,
crazy world.
in the next year, he's not talking about once we're in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Like, why do you feel you have to decide today? Why can't you say we're not gonna decide till after the next legislative session is over?
Because Lubian is saying that,
Right.
and we
There's no
need
way.
time. So Jeff and Lori and we need time to work through this. I listened to Lori and Jeff the other day, the work that we have to go through on it and push them hard on 1/27 based on our partner's request. But there's things that have to get worked through. I don't want our staff spending any more time if your intent
Right.
isn't to move
Yeah.
this. forward. We're at
It's
that point.
weird.
I can't give you any more information on it.
Can't get it free, then we move on.
I think from a Gallagher perspective, like, we've given your, staff has given the feasibility, we've done that twice. We can run a feasibility every single year if you want, but I don't want you to pay for a feasibility study every single year, because every time you run a feasibility, it's always gonna look different. One year, it could say positive 1%, the next year it could say plus 1%. You're making a decision or recommendation based on the philosophy that he has it right up there on the screen, that over the long haul, you are curbing the cost.
Think of my point number 2 then as an E and O issue, there was an error or an omission or whatever. And does that make it more? That's all I'm talking. And my third point, I still want this to be built in such a way where there is an easy or easy-ish ability for others to join. A Carver, I'm just using that
Well,
as an
there
example.
is.
Well, I just want to say
That's in the code, so that's.
I thought there was 2, but I feel like now's the time to say
No, that's a good
what you need to
point.
say. So those are my 3 points.
Because I assume there's gonna be a board resolution eventually, and I think those points are good to include if there's gonna be a board resolution.
There has to be, but it won't be for a while.
That would be next year.
Yeah.
So, okay, I got a question. There's a lot to work through, you've said. What are the uncertainties of working through? In other words, you have to work through stuff with the unions. Are there any deal breakers, any landmines, any things that they're within that? I mean, what do you have to work through?
They have to change the system. They'll have a different third party. Those are the types of things we have to.
What do they have to agree to? The unions.
They have to be consulted and talked with, so that takes time as well, and I think we've already begun those discussions.
The employee insurance committee. If I can, sir, and I don't mean to overgeneralize here. There are a series of very technical arguments about whether this is a merger or a dissolution, whether someone could argue it's a dissolution before being a merger. And some of you have had, again, I say the misfortune of hearing me do a little song and dance about actual versus perceived liability, right? There's actual liability. There's a rule. We have violated a rule. We're going to be held liable for violating it. And there's the perceived liability. We've done something. We haven't violated the rule. We're going to win the case, but we will get sued because there's a perception we violated something. I have been open about a concern that if we don't do our communication well with the unions, as we have done thus far, any one of our unions, particularly our largest union, could, I'm going to use a broad term, it's not great, make a stink, could demand to bargain over a change in terms and conditions of employment, which would require us to either engage with them or get out or retain outside counsel and argue, no, this is something that which we can make a unilateral change on. If it's determined that this is a dissolution of an existing fund, our largest union, which would be AFSCME, would need to be consulted and sign off with that. There's an argument, a good faith argument, that it's not a dissolution, it's a merger. And therefore, but if AFSCME were to make that argument because we didn't do a good enough job of bringing them along and explaining things, and they were to go there, that pauses things, right? There's a request for information, there's hearings, there's an answer that needs to be written, we pay outside counsel. That's another thing, and when I spoke before about my conversation with Andy Benish in Dakota, that I think is part of what he was considering. There's a reality where this is 2-3 meetings, we're all on board, everything's good, and there's a reality where there are disagreements, there's an action, it gets delayed. A greater runway is good for us. So there's that on the labor relations union end. There's again also programming the system, getting integrations going out to RFP once, twice, thrice. It's a full-time job to try to get this thing up and running. And even in the 18-month time period, what 128 would be.
And
But
we have
that's-
the
Harvard is gonna-
decommissioning of our current state, which is more of a finance side, but I believe it includes setting up a trust of a different nature and some things that we have to do with the assets of the current.
Just gonna take some time.
Do you think Carver is going to ask their board to go in without all that work done in advance?
So Carver's in a completely different position than we are. They have to do and get sign off from their largest union.
Cause they're not in a pool.
Because we're already
They're fully insured, not self-insured.
We're
And so
self-insured.
they have even more work to do than we do, and I don't control them. I've been doing this long enough and think well enough of myself that I wish I could control other people. I get them to do it the right way, but I don't know. So
To me, I'll just say this. I think we're being asked to decide a lot with a lot of uncertainty out there, like way beyond than just waiting.
I think this gives us the direction to work through with definitive direction. There's always the wrench that gets thrown into the gears that we can't foresee, but I think we have a plan and a strategy on how to do this from here. We just need, before, like Leslie said, we put more energy in that clear direction that this philosophically is where we want to
I
go.
don't want us to keep wasting. It's a lot of time if we're not going that way.
So Commissioner Redmond, Brett, here, you,
Yeah, I think we should go forward, or I accept the recommendation.
Commissioner Ulrich,
No, hard. no.
Commissioner Wolf.
Well, let's get his answer. I think he kind of said yes.
I don't know what
Okay.
he said.
We're
I
gonna
mean,
move
we're-
forward.
We got 3, but we still should,
Yeah.
But
we-
we
we
have
wanna hear what he said.
We'll wait for Commissioner
we
Wolf.
should hear what he says.
Off the floor.
So we're saying there's not gonna be an RBA soon. There's not gonna be any board action for quite a while. We're just giving direction to continue. But it's kind of
Commissioner
commitment
Brecky, I would
direction.
like, yeah, it's commitment of time, and I think we need to put together a work plan. So Jeff and Danny, I think we need to lay out those timeframes in that work plan. I mean, the language that Senator Pratt had resolved 2 of the big issues right off the bat, right? It stated that everybody could be involved. It was a merger of the pools and that had weighted voting. So we have to get that language right, so that we need to work through.
At what point, knowing that, well, again, communications, please, I don't know how we include everybody that are, or however that works so that no one can say, aha, you didn't do this or whatever. Communications, over communicate. Not over.
I think the communication would be that following direction from the board, we are planning on moving forward with this pending the weight voting issue in the legislature.
We've been waiting. Oh,
That's okay.
Good.
you agree with this?
All right, so we'll put together a time frame and bring that back and you can see the steps. They have a lot of work steps we're gonna have to put together.
At what point do we have a working group? I know you're talking about working with docs, but a working group with partners.
That's coming soon.
Yep, so out of the scale meeting yesterday, we said we will devise a plan for 1/128, which I need to work with Danny, Darcy, Tony to figure out the legal components, but then Gallagher will figure out when does RFP happen? When do we talk about bylaws? All of those things. And I did tell the entire scale group that I will reach out to each entity. Us, you know, for our discussion yesterday was likely for a 1/1 of 28. Are you in or out to be continued? And who are the people that need to have a seat at that table? And we're gonna get that group nailed down so that that work group is settled already yet by the end of this summer. We're meeting, we're talking about bylaws, we're talking about reserves. So that come the next legislative session, that's gonna be off and running, and we already have some of our i's dotted and our t's crossed before we head into RFP next summer.
Danny, does that work group have an elected official and like the
So it's up to
the
who.
city administrator or their ER
So-
or whatever it is?
What we told them yesterday was they needed to have someone who has policy-making authority or policy direction authority, because that's what we ran into. So we said administrators at a no.
But I wonder if having an elected official shouldn't be part of that discussion from an education. So I wonder if the bylaws need to have an elected official and an administrator or their deputy or their ER, whoever their current person is that can make some decisions, but also an elected official at that table.
Important. We can work through what that might look like. The bylaws are, yeah, I'd have to talk with Darcy.
I mean, just sitting here and the importance of that education and understanding and having, you know, if it's Commissioner Wolf, he's on the insurance committee or whoever it is. But I think there should be an elected official potentially at that table as well.
Talk through that.
Given that the recommendation that was accepted says that this will be a county legislative priority or on our platform,
Yeah, it's just.
is the leadership on this work at the legislature and the department transferring from Tony, from Scales lobbyist to county staff taking the lead on this? I think we'll just want some clarity on who's the point person for trying to make this happen next session.
I mean, this. I know there's that blurry line, but this is a scale initiative. Am I right?
Correct. So it should say,
Yeah, I feel like it should say scale and then we worry about who the,
but we don't get to decide scales, let's say, a platform. I think this is just saying it'll be on the county one too.
If we're gonna be
Right.
part of this and we're going this direction, we should make it a priority ourselves. It doesn't mean scale should make it a
in addition
priority
to.
too.
But to Jake's point, then we gotta make sure we know exactly who's the leader, because that could get us in trouble.
I do know that, Carver County also uses Tony Albright as their lobbyist, and they wanted to be part of the discussions because when Jake and I had talked, and was talking with Tony about what needs to change, and they wanted to be part of that discussion as well, because they care about the weighted voting too.
Well, two things. I was curious. I was really bummed to have to miss that meeting yesterday, but I was curious of a reading of the room when this was discussed. But then have we had I know it's, again, body's not cold yet, but a postmortem on like how that all went down? But we don't need the language. Revisor said okay, Senate legal said okay, or maybe.
We haven't had a full postmortem where we talked exactly what was said or done, but I think for us, that's what do we have to do now?
Sure, but
And
it's
make
just,
sure
I
we're
would
not
like to
learning
learn,
something.
I would like to learn from whatever that was or wasn't. Yes, moving forward, but, I don't wanna lose that opportunity of like, what happened here?
The reading of the room, I think there's some frustration that the legislative didn't move,
I bet.
but from the conversations, they all actually felt like 1/128 was okay. There were some that still had concerns about union pieces
Sure,
of this
yeah.
and some of the hurdles we talked through of the process. Again, it is actually one of the members who's not gonna be part of it goes, but just looking at the amount of work, 1/128 is probably not the worst thing in the world to give time for it. Did you say anything?
I would agree with that, because we had a poll ahead of Monday's meeting, who's in or out for 1/1 of 27. And there were 5 that said yes, there were four that said no, they had barriers for 1/1 of 27. But those folks that said not for 1/1 27, they were also the same ones that said that's breathing room and we could consider for 1/1 of 28, so.
Was there anyone who said 27, who said 27 or we're out?
No, there was some strong disappointment that it likely won't happen for 27, but there wasn't any like,
Just wanted,
yeah,
okay,
that's a good.
not unheard of with some of our folks.
As far as the language, just to beat a dead horse a little bit, is there anything, again, going, point number 3 for me was easy-ish ability to add folks that may most likely be outside of Scott County, outside of scale? Is there any weird, again, words matter, any language that would, oh, you're Carver, and again, just use those examples.
The members have to vote to allow them in,
Okay.
and that's the only restriction.
So no voting in the workshop, the consensus was for,
We should continue to put time into this as if we are planning on joining on 1/1/28 with the change in weighted voting.
Mhm.
So up there's accurate, everybody agrees that that's accurate.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Excellent.
All right, the last thing we had today was just, we're, finished up with our nonprofit. Just wanted Jake to kind of summarize that. You have your books, you've got the dollars, you got the cents in front of you. He's gonna kind of walk us through, and there's some things that you want us to look into, change, not continue, those types of things. Jake?
Yeah, thank you, Leslie, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. So just no presentation, you have your books. Really hoping to have an open conversation about the workshops we've had over the last 2 months or so. I have plenty of notes on process improvement from how we create the one pagers, the internal process to get us what is included in your book. I think there was room to improve last year, there's room to improve this year, especially on the timing. Subject matter expert involvement in all of that, so the flow of the partner presentations and making sure they limit their presentations to 5 to 7 slides. And then we give you guys ample time to actually ask questions of staff. But just want to start with an overview of what we should have done the first one. If you remember the first nonprofit workshop we did, I think we went a little longer than we anticipated in the boardroom, and then we rushed in here and I think Tammy from Extension was the first person we had. And we just kind of said, go start talking to us. And there wasn't much of a level setting for why we do these nonprofit workshops at all. So it's to strengthen the relationships between the 5 of you and the folks who are sitting on this end of the table when they're here. And you have an opportunity for some open dialogue. It's to showcase the work they're doing. It's to make sure you understand not only what we contract with these entities for, but hopefully why we contract with them, whether it's totally discretionary levy funds like the Historical Society or the Ag Society, where the board elects to designate some money to those 2 entities. We're not mandated to do that. That's the choice you make. Whether it's something like Mikasa or St. David's, where we have state and or federal dollars, we're still not mandated necessarily to have a contract with organizations like those. So there's some discretion in how those state and federal dollars are delivered, or whether like Canvas or ProAct is something that we're required to do. And we have cases for profit partners that we work with. Whatever the nature of the relationship is, we wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to have some of those nonprofits or for-profit or non-government organizations before you to have some dialogue. So we wanted to share the contract language. We wanted to share also how we try to hold them accountable. So in addition to what are they supposed to be doing for us in exchange for the dollars they receive, also what do they have to give us to prove that they're doing the work they're contracted. And that was all included in your books. And then finally, I think we wanted to put this in front of you in the spring to shape the 2027 budget conversation, especially with the nonprofit partners that receive levy dollars, either in part or entirely funded by levy. Leslie, is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's what we were looking to
Place to
just
start.
have an open discussion on that. I heard different things from different folks sitting in the room those days, so.
Yeah, so I have a couple, that's just sort of to set this up. I have a couple questions of my own, but I wanted to open it up to the 5 of you to start. If there things we wanna make sure we talk about, or you want the staff in the room to hear?
Jake, for me, you hit the nail on the head, how you just described it, but I think maybe next time we even, like you said, do it at the beginning and group nonprofits together a little bit, like Pure Levy discretionary. These are nonprofits that further our strategic plan in a way that we're contracted to do with them. And these are nonprofits, which probably was half of them, that we're contracting to do our work that we have to do anyways. And on that third one, it might be interesting to at least know or understand, if we didn't contract for them, what would be the alternative, 42 staff and $3 million more in levy? Because it's just, there's such a very, yes, they're all nonprofits or organizations, like even Soil and Water, we contract for them to do things, but they're not really a nonprofit, So I don't even know the word we should be using, just because NGOs have got such a bad rap and stuff, but I don't know if there's a better word that we should be, and more accurate too, that we should be using. So I guess I would just look for next time around, we have a little bit more of that structure and that reminding right prior.
And Commissioner, we try, right, to group them. The issue is their dates that they're available. And so as much as you'd like, maybe the fair and fish and the historical society, it's all levy and they can't always do it the day we want them to.
So it might even just be a chart breaking them up in a kind of an overview
That
sheet.
we can do.
Yeah. So I just wanted to emphasize that. You said it. I just felt the need to say it again, I guess.
Nope.
Well, the addition was maybe the opportunity cost for those ones that are doing work we have to do anyways. Just what that,
Those are important distinctions.
it is, it's so different, such a different discussion.
Kind of like an elective.
Yeah.
Versus a,
Might not like them, but it would cost us $1 million more to do what they do that we have to do. That's a really important.
yeah,
fact.
it is.
All right. One question was just, and this is broad, do you feel like you have a better understanding of the nature of our relationships with these community partners, whether they're nonprofit, for-profit, non-government entities? Is that time well spent is probably a shorter way of asking.
I appreciated it. It's just a nice summary to level set on some of these. Some of them I've heard, but never experienced. And not that we've experienced them here, but at least open the door to some of our partners. So I think it's helpful. And in light of the days we live in, I think we do a good job of that anyway, because we know there's some level of relationship with these people. It's not like we're just writing checks and, hey, go do all this stuff. We don't even need to, have accountability for, are we getting the benefit? So I think it was good to just have that level set. I think it probably does need to be an ongoing, especially these days. And I know it's always hard to quantify some of the work some of these folks do. But I think the more we can do that, the better it helps us collectively. Like, does this group, because we have to make hard decisions, right? We have finite resources. I don't want to say infinite partners, because there's definitely not that either. To your point, like sometimes we have to work with somebody because it is new. Right. And that, I don't mean to make that sound totally negative, but, I think Guild kind of felt some more. But it was good that I think I mentioned too, it's good that we're having this conversation because, there isn't an elephant in the room because we're having this conversation. So the money needs to make sense. We need to be getting hope and transformation and whatever these outcomes happen to be. And sometimes they're tough to measure, so I get that, but kind of going back to the old budget book days, it's less about, well, how many computers we have, how many devices, and I know it wasn't necessarily that, but it's more like, hey, what are we doing? What are you doing? 18 tabs in this book to move the needle and move people forward.
I agree. I think there might have been an opportunity. I don't know if it's before or after the presentation. My gut says when the visitors are gone, where our staff who work most closely with that organization, just give kind of a quick analysis, you know, I feel like these guys are good for this reason, they'd be great at this. If I could change them in any way, I would do this. And here's our other options if we decide they're not a good fit, because there might be sometimes contracted case management, other options. Sometimes there's something like there aren't any other
Yeah,
options,
yeah.
nobody else will run that for.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think some staff feedback, and then the second thing I just thought of is. And I know they were given direction on how to present, but this is so different. Some of them gave a lot of information about their whole organization, which if I were asked to come, I might think I want to do that. And some of them really focused on the part of their organization that worked and contracted with us. Both those things are valid, but I think we should ask and direct which one we want, because it was hard to, I don't know, not evaluating them against each other, but to evaluate their worth and presence based on, did they talk about their whole organization, which is great, but our only connection with them is this much, or they only talked about the connection. I don't know. The
Yeah,
answer to that.
that's an opportunity to improve the process. I felt like we spent a fair amount of time, Katie and Jen Schultz and I, on the invitation and being clear that we're looking for what we contract with you. That's the content we want to
Yeah,
hear about.
okay,
This is what you're working on in response to the contract you have with Scott County. And what do you plan to do in 2026, 2027, whatever the duration of your contract is? But we can always try to be clearer in our communication to them when we make the invitation. And like, staff who don't have a presentation ready for the meeting today, some of our partners didn't have presentations ready until Tuesday morning or Monday night, where it's hard for us to say, get us your presentation so we can take a review of that. And then send it back to them and say, this is way too broad, we need to do it.
right,
So that's another opportunity for us to say, can you get it to us 2 weeks in advance? So we can have some dialogue, not just with me and Katie, but with the subject matter experts about what the presentation's actually going to be.
and just give them an opportunity for that additional information they can give to us.
Right.
Great, I'd like
That
to
could be
learn about
included in the book, yeah.
what they're doing in some other aspects.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I like the idea of kind of giving us a little bit longer runway overall. I think would be good and having them be able to present about their whole organization, because sometimes maybe they picked up a new service line that we weren't aware of that actually would be probably helpful to us, or we could add, or we could tweak a different area of service. So I do think that would be helpful. And I also like what you said too about like giving a quick synopsis. I think about Canvas Health, like I pick on them, like it may be helpful for you to know, like the last time we did an RFP for them and that we actually, they were the only ones that bid on the RFP. And so this is what we have, but like over time, like we continue to work with them. We meet with them 3 times that like you can get an opportunity to really hear like how much
What the relationship is.
manage the contract too. So I think that could be built in.
The big question I had, I think everything was valuable, good discussion, good information. Was, why are we doing this first? Why is this not why isn't our main budget, our main items of our budget, our main departments, why aren't those budget presentations, discussions, the ones we're having first? This is kind of a smaller part of what our budget is,
Well, I'm gonna answer that one,
Okay.
Commissioner, because we were asked to do this outside of the budget process ahead of it.
What does that mean?
Because last year we did it during the budget process, and I think some of us felt it was too late, especially if we wanted to make cuts. Like we did, like in September, hearing from each of those agencies, they're already kind of budgeting for next year. And I don't think this was the budget presentation. This was supposed to be this is information about these organizations and how we work with them. So that we could start giving feedback to administration earlier.
Correct. I mean, if you decide, I don't know, I'll pick one, we don't want to fund fish anymore, or we don't want to fund Canvas Health anymore. We have to figure out then, one, we'd have to notify them. So for fish, it would be, this is changing your funding. for Canvas Health, if we decided we didn't want to do that, it might be staff, it might be a different provider, and all of those would take time.
Well, I'm just gonna use a really imperfect illustration. To me, it was like, we got the cake, and we got the frosting, and instead of frosting, and we talked about the frosting before the cake. In other words, when I say frosting, it's imperfect because it means, it kind of said these are extra, not important, by the frosting. I don't mean that. It just means the bulk of what we do is the other. This is sort of just a thin layer of a relationship with it. So that's the only reason.
So thinking about the timing and just the overall budget impact, especially to our levy of these nonprofits, relatively small compared to the rest of the budget conversation we have and where the rest of our levy dollars goes. But it seems to you, Commissioner, that maybe this would come after we have those.
Well, and
other
part of the
budget
reason, of course, we didn't know how the legislature was going, so you could have said, well, depending on the legislature, that would really impact the cake, the bigger part of what we do. So we don't know what that is. So maybe that's a reason to make this first, which would be fine then, if that was the reason. However, if it was cataclysmic with the federal and state, we'd be looking at the cake and saying, what pieces are we really gonna cut out of the cake that we never would have contemplated? I mean, if we're in so that was kind of how I was looking at kind of globally.
I think from a staff standpoint, I'm just speaking as one person, I think it's helpful as the cabinet goes into some 2027 budget conversations to even just have a sense, and maybe we revisit this. One of my questions for you is there additional information you need on some of these partners and the outcomes they are or not achieving for us to bring forward to you as part of the budget process? But I think for the cabinet, as we're starting to talk about the 2027 budget, if the five of you said, we need you to trim $100,000 from extension, we're given whatever it is, 350,000 levy to extension, and based on what we heard from them in April, we're thinking that's one that could be cut, or we think the Historical Society could be cut. That's good for us. I think it's good for us to know as we start to build out that picture overall.
Yeah, well, of course, I was going, what happens if you have to cut $2 million out of the staff? I mean, if it was cataclysmic in terms of the federal and state. That was kind of why I was thinking, this, but maybe it would have been too soon, and I don't know what's gonna happen fully with the federal, no, I guess we don't know what's due, but it seems like they were withholding more funds all the time.
Yeah, I would say the cake doesn't look very appealing right now.
And maybe we can end that analogy now. It's not helpful.
I guess I would like more of a, impact if they didn't come back, if there's somebody that didn't come back, what would be the impact on the organization? I can guess, but I don't know. And what is the impact, like I think Art said, with if you had a different organization? I don't know what those options are. Some of those organizations that we talked to, there is no other option. But there's others that I don't know. Maybe.
Another way to say it one more time. It's hard to put these in context without knowing how dire our situation is with a larger of what we do. That's just that was why I had a question.
That makes sense.
I agree with that, but I think we'll be more prepared in a couple months if we see it's dire. Because I think, at least I have a better understanding of each of those organizations and what they.
Yeah, it's not a huge point, I guess. I wondered.
Maybe one example of that is I think about the upcoming Scott County Delivers as it relates to Path and Pass, the transformation homes and the FRC, and seeing some of the players that potentially perform those services and then having those all line up right before we move into kind of those budget conversations. At least we can put kind of a face and a presentation to that work and those decisions as we move forward the next few months.
So we had 18. One thing that I know I didn't say it in any of the workshops, we don't have only 18 nonprofit, non-government partners that we're in a contractual relationship with. Scott had and Paul Hyduck had pulled some information both from the accounting side and from the contract side. And we were in the 60s, so dozens of organizations that we have some relationship with where dollars are passing from the county to one of these nonprofit, for-profit, non-government organizations. Some of those are CHIP subgrantees and cannabis subgrantees. And Lisa provided a full list of both of those. And we brought some partners to the table here that receive both cannabis funds and CHIP funds. ProAct was one example of sales funding, and I'm gonna forget what that's semi-independent living services. So those are dollars that flow through Scott County, and that's one of our partners, but I don't think it's the only partner we work with that receives those dollars. So that was one example of a partner. I want to give Paul and Scott credit for doing that work retroactively to try to, it was challenging in our previous system to identify which partners are nonprofits, which are for-profits, which are non-government entities. In Workday and strategic sourcing, which is essentially the contract module that we use in our Workday environment. They're both working to ensure we have tags on all those vendors that we work with so that we know we don't have to look up everything. This is a nonprofit. They're registered with the Attorney General's office. They are or they are not a 501c3. Our system will have that information. Leslie, Scott, Paul, and I think are meeting this afternoon to talk through what the reporting needs to look like going forward. But I will say, our Scott County staff, short of having sort of the Workday environment, pre-Workday, we had folks stopping payment on invoices because the information on the invoice did not align with what the contract said they had to provide us. So it's not just the nonprofit partners that I think are feeling some of the additional scrutiny. It's our staff, I think, having an awareness across the organization. Fraud obviously is a big deal in Minnesota. It's in the news all the time. If we're going to be passing dollars through, whether they're levy dollars, state dollars, federal dollars, they're all coming from the public at some level, and we need to be good stewards of those.
Yes. So what
that
would we do in those
continues to be-
cases? It's literal, a stop payment on something. Like, what do we do? Is that being referred someplace? Is that investigated? What's the next step from that?
So
Assuming somebody
I'll defer, because most of them are in HHS, not because of anything, about the nature of their work or anything. It's,
No, it's just.
they have so many partners. That's where most of the nonprofit partners are. And I'm aware of at least one that has had stopped payments.
Well, I think,
because of the invoice.
anytime we have a contract, I think it's our responsibility that we have to look at the invoice and make sure that it matches the contract. And sometimes it's not because anybody was being fraudulent. Like, we've talked a lot in Health and Human Services lately. Fraud gets the headlines, but mistakes aren't fraud.
Sure.
And sometimes people just make mistakes. And so we will go back to those individuals, to those agencies and be clear about, here's what it is that we contracted you for. And this is the documentation we're gonna need to see, and the invoice being correct before we're able to make payment for you. So.
I think you even saw in one of the meetings, because of a grant they received above us, they have to change their process, and I think it's made them more aware why we're requiring what we require. And so there are some positives
Sure.
from that as well.
So you talked about, okay, there's 18 here, there's really 60-ish or whatever, and these different pots of money. Is that like those $5,000 and $10,000 grants you're talking about that are going, but they still have to go to a group that's properly
I could,
licensed
Yeah,
or?
Lisa can speak to it and elaborate on what I'm about to say and correct if it's wrong. But for SHIP anyway, you need a receipt of something,
Oh, yeah.
right? You need to actually have proof that
Paid record.
there's something real there. But go ahead, Lisa.
I was gonna say, well, they submit for all of those mini grants, SHIP and CSUP, any mini grant, they submit a budget ahead of time with a list of all their expenses. Those are pre-approved by us. It also gets approved by Minnesota Department of Health. And then it's all reimbursable, so they have to expend the money first. And they send us literally pages and pages and pages of receipts. I mean, last time, I think it was Mikasa submitted a cost of something and we rejected it for $1.58 because it wasn't on the list. Or it wasn't included. I mean,
As a mini grant recipient of the SHIP a couple of years ago, I can attest.
yeah, so we go through those, especially the newer grant, like CSEP, we go through those with a fine tooth comb. Minnesota Department of Health sends us like a 60-page financial guide of what's an allowable expense. And every once in a while, something, I mean, there's so many things that they're purchasing, some receipt might get in there and they think, yep, this is a reimbursable expense, and it's not.
Yeah.
And so it gets rejected, but it's not that they submit it, like, until that's approved, that's when it gets submitted, goes to financial, everything needs to be approved first.
It's not, what's the other one in the news? Cause you know, fraud's got the headlines and rightfully so. Although last workshop I had somebody say, no, it's a fraud already, like, okay, but whatever. So we're documenting all that stuff.
Mhm.
Feel like there's a benefit, so that's really my question. So of these 18 tabs plus up to the 60 or whatever, like, do we, and the we is you, feel like there's benefit to doing this, the paper part, and then actually the work that's getting done in between these tabs? Like, is the needle being moved? Or is it like, oh boy, the board wants more, open transformation again, here we go. And I know the answer is probably different for the blue one versus the green, you know, a little bit different for each one, again, functions for each of these different tabs. Are we collective believers in this movement, whatever you want to call it?
You know, I think,
Or is that not supposed to ask that?
you know, I think probably 8-10 years ago, we really put an emphasis on, are there things that government doesn't have to do? We can bring nonprofits in to do it instead. And if you look at our contracted case management in here, you look at Canvas Health, like just between those two contracts alone, that's probably 50-60 FTEs we would have had to have here. And then you think of some of the prevention and supplemental work that we do, like we don't have to do that. We certainly don't. I think we really see a lot of promising practice because of that. And I think we've learned that as government, we can set the table and bring others to it and hopefully do things that we can't and really shouldn't do. So I think there's, and I feel like this county does a really great job of emphasizing partnership and relationship, and those relationships getting results. And I feel like we've done that across all of our respective divisions with reaching out. So and we probably are believers then.
I would also add, in some cases for these nonprofits, because of their relationship with us, even though we're just giving them a tiny little bit of money, they're able to go out and leverage other dollars, other partnerships, other grants, and they bring in so much more than we give them. And they're able to maximize that because of our relationship. I mean, they serve an incredible number of people. I can't tell you, how much they served. In some cases, if they're going to tell me they served 200 people, I know that my $2,500 didn't pay for that, right? We built the food pantry, is the example I gave earlier. We built the food pantry, we gave them the skill, and they brought in 200 people and were able to provide food for. I mean, we didn't pay for the food, we paid for the pantry. So I think that they do a lot for very little.
Yeah,
and
good.
I think they can do it cheaper than us. And they are also more trusted than we are because we're government. I mean, that's also another piece that they bring to the table.
I think it has helped create sort of like that right balance. Right, there was this huge push in 2016, 17, like how are we partnering? So it was really a lot of relationship building, and now it's it's both, right? It's relationship building, engagement with providers or partners, and it's making sure we're good stewards of the dollars. And it's not that we weren't in the beginning, but like that was really rapid growth. And so this has set, I think, just a more balanced conversation of what's the good work you're doing And how are we doing that, to be good stewards of the dollar?
So the next step in that question would be, okay, if everyone sitting around this room has some level or another, how deep is that thought and belief being driven down into the org? Is it becoming part of who we are? Or just, people in this room of who we are? Cause that, then the flywheel starts turning on its own, sort of.
Are you saying both the belief in having a nonprofit piece or just the stewardship?
Well, both. I mean, both.
I think it's both. And I will say, from the nonprofit side, I think our staff also see the results on this, and our department heads can speak to this, but I will say from a program integrity side, I think everything that's happened in the last year related to fraud has really highlighted and to a certain extent shaken our staff on all of this. I think people want to do a really good job, and they really don't want to do anything that is going to get anybody in trouble. So like when we had the Department of Human Services and we had to do, Danny whipped together an internal controls documentation. And by the way, both him and Steve Jones got a gold star by DHS for their work. Which is good. But it's that level of questioning that we're getting now. And I think it has really shook people, because DHS hasn't, and DCY, but they haven't always given us prescriptive guidance on how to get this done in really, really complicated budgets. So I will say both, like all the way down the org.
Good.
I think if we could have those conversations, like you said about maybe afterwards, just with the staff, I think logistically, we could share some examples or pragmatically how it's being embedded down to the staff. I tried a little bit during those presentations to kind of popcorn those in, but it was challenging. I was like, do I say this now? Because I do think that's important to hear, that our staff meet with them routinely, that they're on speed dial, that we're doing all these things, which I think is an example of maybe what you're talking about. But if we could have those more frank conversations, without that, I think you might hear more about more examples. Cause it's really hard to quantify that.
Sure.
So I just think my brain goes to what does that look like in real life?
I also think there's a difference in the nonprofits we're talking about. So if you go to HHS, right? Most of them are doing work that would have to be done one way or another, right? We'd be staffing the IRTs 24/7 or something like that, or can't, we're not set up, we're not capable of doing that. So I think there it is a lot more accepting, and it's the partnerships we've been looking for, and that's their lane. I would guess if you were to ask staff within this organization, is the Historical Society or the fair or extension more important than the work we do if we have to make some substantial cuts? You probably get some pushback on the work we do is more important. But as a board, you've made the decision, those are important to the community and they need to exist. And without your support, they wouldn't. So I think, the SWCD is a good example. We need the work they do, but we don't need it all the time. So to contract with them and make them a stable organization, so they're there when we need them for planning and zoning, or the WMO and parks, that highway department, it's a really good partnership and a good thing.
Yeah.
But I think some of those other ones I talk about, I think you'd probably get a little more pushback that Commissioner Brecky, Master Gardeners isn't more important than a toll file, right? And I mean, I think that's a legitimate assertion. I would agree. I agree.
Well, and that goes to sort of the distinction of these different tabs, there's just these different.
Yeah.
But I think that's, the fact that we're even talking about it and having these types of conversations is awesome. Correct. There's always gonna be a little tension, always little hurdles, anything worth doing seems better.
One, it's good, they get to hear your viewpoints and that you get to hear from all of them. If we just sit and don't have these conversations, that's why I believe in work sessions so much, you get to have some of that.
Yes.
I think it's important for our work.
I do too.
Yeah, I would say, what I thought I heard in 2 questions.
We'll check here and see.
One is, I think staff across the board, at least at the level that I see, on a regular basis, believe in working with nonprofit partners and community partners. And kind of like part B to that answer is, who cares what they believe? It's in your values that you guys adopted. Team that we're gonna work with partners, not just nonprofits, but faith communities and schools, cities, chambers, all those groups. That's part of our marching orders as county employees, right?
Their first day at new employee orientation, when they walk in that Monday, there's 3 values that get highlighted. Partnership is the first one.
So the partnership, right, that's important, and I see an equal commitment to the stewardship, like, do we believe it's worth investing time to be good stewards of every dollar, even if they're not levy dollars? To make sure if we're contracting with a nonprofit partner and it's state dollars, but we are a partner in that relationship, we have a role in making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, regardless of whose dollars they are. I see a commitment to that as well.
And the third one is the innovation. Those are the 3, every one of them. And those Scott Delivers that are coming before you this summer are all about nonprofits and innovation. And do we want to continue, right? When we went down the ARPA path, we made a commitment. We'll bring back the data. Is the FRC, is it doing what you wanted it to do? Are the transition homes doing what you want to do? Are those neglect and truancy programs doing what you want to do? Those are your next 3 Scott Delivers and a review of those. All of those are in here and it's your choice to make.
And lastly, just to throw some more credit to Scott Head, he brought up some partners that they're even the ones that don't have dollars exchanged. So he brought to my attention, we have a relationship with Shepherd the Lake Lutheran Church. We have an MOU with them. We're not giving them any money, but we have an agreement with them to do work. So he highlighted that as we should think about bringing this forward, because if Shepherd the Lake somehow gets in trouble for fraud, or they're doing the wrong thing at Hope's Portage, that impacts Scott County in some way, just because we have a relationship with them. So there are partnerships, and those to me feel more like true partnerships, where we're not exchanging dollars necessarily, we're working together to make something happen. So this is a long, long way of saying this is just the tip of the iceberg, the 18 partners that we had before you. But they all obviously had dollars on the table.
So I'm thinking about that gap between the 18 we had and the 60 or so we talk about. I'm assuming that many of those, that are 42 are nonprofit partners that provide services. For example, it might be a nonprofit substance abuse treatment situation, or a place where we send a juvenile. Those are all the nonprofits that got pulled from accounting.
Yes.
Right.
So Scott did a 2025 look back, and there were several placement providers.
Yeah, so I bet a lot of them are that. So I have 2 thoughts on those. I feel like some of the 18 also fall in that category, and why are we choosing these ones versus these ones? We might send a kid here every month. But then I'm like, maybe that doesn't need the deep dive. We just need to know that these processes are being followed, because who am I to decide if this treatment provider is better than this one? I think that's more staff's decision. But then on the other hand, when we think about fraud, I know we want to be done talking about fraud. So much of the fraud has happened because of those kind of providers not doing what they said they would do either. So that might just be an interesting, all these are these kind of providers. And here's the additional structure we put in place to make sure that doesn't happen. Because if we look at most of the fraud in Minnesota, we all know it's not that we gave somebody 22 extra bucks for food stamps. It's about somebody who got paid to house individuals and really didn't house them, or didn't house them to the level they said they were, or didn't supervise a group home during the night, or whatever it is. That's what the fraud, the bulk of it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as we think to next year, that might be just a different grouping with a different, why take that in-depth look at Pinnacle when there's 32 other organizations that provide that same kind of contracted service? I don't know. I mean, that was just an example. That might not be true.
Right. Yeah, a lot of the fraud occurred really not due to a county host contract where we were the payer. It was a licensed facility
that receive direct payments from the state, that of people that may or may not have even been included as
Right.
like a county service.
Right, and I get that, but I
Yeah.
just think they're closer to where there could be fraud, like, that's the part that I have a hard time explaining to residents, it's
Yeah.
really not that there's fraud because I got $43 that I wasn't supposed to get, that's not
Right.
where it's happening. If it was gonna happen at the county level, it might be more, and it's probably not even fraud, sometimes it's misuse, sometimes abuse,
Yep.
sometimes saying you supervise people overnight, you didn't.
Yeah, and this wasn't set up just for fraud. It was
No.
To show you what we do in the contract management, which I think has improved. I think we're doing better with that all of the time. And we just tried to give you examples and then
Yeah.
the biggest ones, right? You know, there are some we pay a lot more money to than the $5,000. And so those were all in front of you.
I wanted to go back to the, you know, so we had 18 tabs, some extras and, you know, go up to 60 or whatever, but like SOL, how they're a partner, zero money, MOU, SE, you know, dealing with Hope's Portage, you know, kind of a big deal. And you know, how I feel about fish, the fair, some of these other things. I love, like, I'm pro fish. Love to see them be self-sustainable. The fair, be great for them to be self-sustainable. Don't want to see the fair go away. Don't, you know, so just having some of those. Cause I think that's ultimately at least my goal would be, yeah, if we need to seed money for a time, whatever it is, to get things really ramped up, if they're. But it's not building nonprofits, it's helping nonprofits scale. Sort of would be the ideal to bring about hope and transformation in people's lives. Like, I'm willing to spend that money. Unless they want to build a nonprofit, if they can't help themselves already. But to have someone like that as an example in the book, and just to keep relationships and communications, because I think that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, we heard it from, I think it was Christy from Southern Valley when she was sitting here. And they had some of their financial information that they shared. The federal and state funds that are foundational for a lot of these nonprofit
Yeah.
partners in particular,
Right.
those are changing. So that potentially the county role looks a little different. In sustaining the work that, if we believe it's good work that's happening, we have an opportunity to step in and.
Well, and I know we've talked about this before too, but a byproduct is county is convener of sorts of these different nonprofits. You know, I think it was 360. I mean, a couple of the different ones said about, well, we try to be careful not to duplicate this. You know, if you already have 3 different orgs or groups in your county doing X, Y, and Z, like why are we here doing X, Y, and Z? But if you get some, and I know we're all the human dynamic and creatures of, you know, routine and habit, but if there were things like, so we'd have better coverage through multiple nonprofits that aren't doing a ton of overlap, you always have a little bit. In shingles, it's very good to have overlap, so nonprofits maybe a little overlap's not the worst thing. But you know what I'm saying, where they can, in this day and age where everyone's getting squeezed, like what we're talking about with insurance and other things, working with partners that, not that they don't know each other exist, but that would be another thing that happens in those roundtables when different nonprofits are colliding with one another.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Wolf brought that up at one point. Why do we have so many people or partners that are doing the same thing? And can we help figure out what's the right amount of overlap for those shingles?
That guy should run again. You run it again?
I think you're fine.
Did he? Didn't you?
He did file.
Oh, look at that.
I'm gonna go down and file just to.
Just to.
You should do it.
You'll be tweaking Drew.
$50.
Your name is all over his stuff.
Just a recent.
Psych. Sorry, Drew.
Not really.
So I have been taking a lot of notes. I'm guessing Katie has too, and others have, on opportunities for improvement for next time. One other question I had was, is there additional information you want staff to bring forward for the budget process relative to these nonprofit and other partners?
I sort of asked it earlier, but I'll ask it again differently. Are there things, groups, partners, programs that we're working with or not working with that you, subject matter experts, like, why are we doing, why do they want us to do this? You feel like you have a platform to be able to pull us aside or talk to us as a group and be like, why are you doing this? Did you know about that? Or whatever. Just throwing it out there, because I think it's important to have two-way communication.
So I hope our message like to the fair has been correct. I mean, Jake and I were pretty clear, and I think they may be reflected in here that if you don't come up with some type of plan to help moving yourself forward, I wouldn't count on this $100,000, you know, post this 26, 27 timeframe. So that is a message we you need to start to build a sustainability plan and.
I've only been saying that for 20 years.
Yeah, we do 50, I do 50.
I think she meant historical.
Oh,
And I say the fair, historical society.
okay, I think we have that on the list.
But they, I mean, that's been the message. So, I mean, how much time do we give them is they actually have, I think Mr. O'Brien working on it. He's got a business plan. They actually have somebody who doesn't want to sit and file cards, but actually wants to do some fundraising and put a business plan together. Is it we tell them we're going to 75,000 in 2027, or do we leave it? I mean, that's a direction we've kind of been pushing with them a little bit. The fair, we're down to 50,000, but we also give them 50,000 in operating for a building that is weird. But we've been supportive. We provided them their fiber. We've given, looking for a business plan. Brad's been trying to work with them. We do an annual agreement with the fair. So that, another one we've been kind of nursing along that way. And she came with a strategic plan that I think looked the same as the last one we saw. So I'm not sure how many steps they're making with that. But those are a couple of them that, at some point we'll need some direction on as we're putting the budget together for 27. And we're doing a 2-year model, right? I mean, we've got to look at 27 and 28 based on what we know coming out of the legislature, so.
Yep.
Is there anything, I mean, we have folks in the room, subject matter experts, Nikki, Lisa, Tanya, Suzanne, Barb. That like, what was that? Because this isn't just my thing, obviously. So are there other things that need to be said? Yes, before we.
Well, I think that's a difficult question to sort through, like, is it worth it? Because I know like the people we have working with are nonprofits, it's work, like we build that relationship, we make sure it's getting done.
Yep.
We watch those invoices and we do all of that. And sometimes it's really hard to measure the absence of something. I mean, I think about our cultural navigators in the Family Resource Center. They have a trusted relationship with our community and they're bringing people in to our Family Resource Center that wouldn't come to this government building for help, and we would see them in a different way. I think we talked about our Somali community, and when they would get a report of educational neglect, they would move. Well, those are resources about filing with the court, searching for them, doing all that, when it could just be a language barrier. They don't understand they have to call the school when their kid's not there. And so I think that's kind of weighing, like, what are resources we're putting out for the services we're getting for families.
Well, for me, let me put it another way too. Like, if there's something, like, I've said this in different meetings, maybe it's time again, like, I have a certain expectation, I have an expectation of all of you. Like, if there's something I say or don't say, like, what did you mean by that? Or did you know this? Or like, what are you smoking or whatever? Call me. You might have to chase me a little bit, text me maybe. Like, I want to know that. I want to hear that. I want to be aware if I'm not aware. We may disagree, we may not disagree. So I just, it's important that we have two-way comms on all this stuff just to be made aware. And everyone has a voice. It's okay to agree to disagree.
I think for the, and yes, I would if I did, I have actually before. But with the books, so you keep kind of referencing those books, I think those things, so words are not my thing today. The, one pagers that we all put together, I think if there's things that we could prepare ahead of time for you in those one pagers, if they could be like clearly outlined for us to like fill in I like a template and I
I don't know if other people are like that, but, I mean, I would likewise be open to feedback on those one pagers. If there's things in there where you're like, this wasn't very helpful, I want this. I would like to know that, because then I can just stick it in there and that's what we're like data analyses over here. We hold data and I think we have it and we're happy to share it. We just don't know what pieces and what would be helpful.
Is, I know we're still new to it, but I know Workday will do everything except make you coffee, but will it help put some of these things to, because I know these can be laborious, you know, this or the budget books or any other stuff. No, you're shaking your
They'll
head.
help with the budget book.
Well, and so,
Financial information, but it's not a just magic report generator.
you know, I know, but you can set things up. Well, we don't need to get into the details. Will it help once we're fully? But some of this stuff is hard to measure too, so it's, but will it help? Being data driven, like truly data driven, but then there's human lives and it's that confluence of where.
Yeah, I think it's gonna help us with some of the data and being able to pull it. I mean, Jake, Barb, Danny and I yesterday in the CIP meeting had a long discussion on being able to pull it by kids and adults versus public safety versus infrastructure. What does this data look like and how much are you investing? So some of those things are coming, but it takes time now to get all that set up and then be able to pull it how you want to see it, so.
And make you coffee or no? Still not doing it.
Yeah,
It's not making me coffee very clearly.
I just wanted to also make a comment. Looking at the nonprofits, I don't really look at it to go like, why are they doing that? How public health has so many things that we have an assurance role on, where if nobody else in the community is doing it, we have to do it. And so one of the examples is our Health Matters Clinic. Nobody was offering free health services, so we had to do it because it has to be at least one provider in the county. That's why we've been working so hard to try and build those relationships with, for example, integrated health centers. It's taken 6 years to get them here. And also CAP agency also started offering it. So now that we have 2 providers, we're able to pull that back because that role is being offered. And now we can focus on some of our other mandated services that we might not have been, or that we might not be doing such great performance on, for example, getting kids caught up in vaccinations. So that, you know, when I liked these presentations because it made me think, oh, I wonder if they can do X, Y, Z, so we don't have to.
Yeah.
And I think that really increases our efficiencies and we're able to really focus on especially the mandated ones, because that's tax levy. So what can we do either cheaper or what can someone else do for us? So I'm really excited with the Integrated Health Center and we're gonna start pulling back and focusing more on those vaccinations and those services, because, I mean, we have measles case, we have possible hantavirus case, we just found out about meningitis case, and infectious disease is one of our key services that we really need to do some more focus on. So I think we just look at it a little bit differently versus what, you know, are they doing that? Do they really need to?
But it frees up resources and like that cascade effect, like where else besides like literally right now, would you have been able to say that? I don't know. So I just like the idea of having time afterwards to explain why this is important
Yes.
in our
I love that, to say that's really powerful, because so often we think about, you know, stopping doing something and then we're gonna have money and offer tax relief. But really, that should be part of day-to-day operations, where we stop doing something and have some money to put into something that we weren't doing as well, or that costs us more now, or that we still have to do. And sure, I'd love to just lower property taxes too, but this is a good story of good stewardship that didn't necessarily result in lower property taxes, but it's allowing us to focus on what we're supposed to focus on. And that kind of situation should almost be the norm if we're really partnering and learning. So I think it's great. Somebody should keep a list of those things to remind us when we don't remember.
Yep.
And I fully agree. I would bet my colleagues do that infectious disease is one of the most important things for public health to do. So thank you for putting more effort there.
I guess I would like to know if you have a good partnership with people, if there's pushback whenever there's a question, if you're getting the information that you're supposed to get. If you know that they're actually doing the work that they're committed to do. Yeah, I think, you know, relationship is really important and making sure that they're doing the work that they said that they're gonna do and making sure that they're not legitimate's not the right word, but have, you know, their financial statements and they're registered with the state and, you know, because there's more to it than just, are you doing it? Yeah. There's a lot more to it. So.
Sometimes it's the relationship between the nonprofits that's problematic. Our relationship with them might be good. But I think sometimes they misconstrue and make statements about other nonprofits that led to an issue earlier that you all got to hear about, right? And so the follow-up on that was pretty clear. We did the amount of money we said we were gonna do, and that statement wasn't how it was said, so. I think we've come a long way on checking because of Scott and Paul and these guys' efforts on are they with the Attorney General? Their financials, all those things that we need to see. So I feel a lot better about that now than I even did 3 years ago.
It's nice to hear such positive feedback from you all, that you found the conversations valuable, because there's always energy and effort that goes into it. And lots of people around the table did a lot to do that, but it was interesting this year compared to last year, like the people coming back, being able to speak and kind of grow on something, and maybe not as much as we want in some regards. But I thought I think that's a nice benefit that we see, but also I was thinking too, you know, like Tanya might have a relationship with the nonprofit, but then also for them to have that relationship with you all, and for them to see that the board and county staff are in alignment, so that if there is some kind of realignment that needs to happen, that's really coming from multiple different avenues. And I think there are some good conversations that happened with that.
Anything else? Thank you for the conversation. Appreciate it.
We have good conversations here. I haven't been everywhere, but I think we're always willing to hear everybody out.
That wasn't actually. Well, they worded you.
Round robin?
Didn't say that.